This young man with an incredibly handsome but disheartened face is our protagonist. Alon used to be a slave, working up to 78 hours a week. Yet now he has reincarnated into the body of a noble in a fantasy world. Sounds great, right? Well, it is. However, the character he inhabited is illiterate and powerless, spending every day just eating and playing, living uselessly like an earl's spoiled son. The only thing he doesn't know is where he currently is. Just as Alon was enjoying the attention of the maids, a maid beside him reminded him, "You should rest early, sir. The young masters will return tomorrow." Alon, surprised, asked, "The young masters?" The maid replied in astonishment, "Young Master Leo and young Master Tonio. You sound like you've never heard of the Palacio family." Hearing that name, Alon immediately froze. The name Palacio filled him with dread. It was hauntingly familiar. The maids looked at him with concern. Master Alon pressed his face into the maid, unsettled. Could this be psyche deliria? Alon remembered the title of a game he'd once played. The game he used to play in the few spare moments he had, back when he was an office slave. It was a turn-based RPG. No matter which storyline the player started with, once the 5 great sins appeared: wrath, greed, sloth, pride, obsession. The kingdoms, noble houses, and cities began to collapse catastrophically. Among them, the Palacio Count's family stood out. They were a degenerate noble household that appeared in a side quest before the main storyline began. Alon sank to his knees in despair. Right, I know this place all too well. He searched his memory for information about the family. Alon looked at the grand manor before him in hopelessness. Really? Why does it have to be the Palacio Count's family, the first to be destroyed by the 5 great sins? Please, I'd rather go back to being a slave working 78 hours a week. Living in luxury with no meaning, knowing everything will fall in 10 years, feels worse than being owed 6 months' pay. Why does a transmigrator like me have no privileges at all? Wait, privileges? Right. Knowing the game's content 10 years in advance, doesn't that mean I basically know the future? If so, I just need to eliminate the causes that lead to annihilation before they happen. And so, to enjoy a peaceful, noble life, he decided to reform the 5 great sins. He told himself, they're probably still children, maybe there's a chance to save them. 2 months later in his study, while hearing a report, I rescued orphans in the East, specifically victims turned into living test subjects. Among them, I assigned the orphanage's management to a girl named Yusha. Alon beamed with pride, eyes lighting up. My judgment wasn't wrong, you're truly very capable. Evan replied, yes, sir. But that was a compliment, right? For the young master never shows emotion on his face. He nodded to confirm. Then, Evan, I expect you to support me more from now on. Evan stammered, this is going to be hard to get used to. Alon looked at his face in the mirror and thought, this face used to be very expressive, but it seems only the skin on the face didn't fully take on a soul. Evan is one of the rare supporting characters in the game. He's loyal, so I summoned him. Evan said, anyway, thank you for the compliment, young master. But this time you said the raid was to rescue a girl named Yusha, right? Alon replied, that's right. Evan continued, I must admit I now understand why you chose her. Even with my seasoned eye, after years roaming with mercenaries, that girl was by no means ordinary. He recalled the scene of entering the prison to rescue the children. Evan said in amazement, she was so strong I couldn't understand why she allowed herself to be imprisoned like that. Why didn't you bring her here? Wouldn't that be a loss for you? Alon agreed. A fair point. He fell into thought. On the surface it looks like I'm wasting a power I could use, but leaving things as they are is part of the plan. Yusha is a bloodline who signed a pact with an indescribable otherworldly entity, possessing unfathomable power, and later will become Wrath, one of the 5 great sins responsible for hundreds of deaths. But if the girl is raised in a peaceful environment, she surely won't walk the path of destruction. That way I've defused the first-time bomb. Now I just have to come up with a reason not to bring her here. Alon spoke, yes, that's right. He leaned on his hands, emphasizing, because the time isn't right yet. Evan exclaimed in surprise, the time isn't right yet. Alon nodded, exactly. Make sure this doesn't get out and provide for the girl properly. He received the order. Yes, I understand. Suddenly he took out an item. And give this to Yusha. Evan asked, is it a letter? Is the content important? Alon replied, just a letter of condolence. She went through horrific biological experiments, so I thought sending some comfort might help calm her. He took it. You even write letters like that? I'll deliver it carefully. After that, he stood by the window and watched Evan ride off. Alon worried, I wonder if it will really comfort her. The real content hidden in that condolence letter was something he'd heard dozens of times while playing the game. It was the incantation to befriend a bloodline, so it would have a calming effect. Wrathful sin, be at peace. The sorrow of shadow, the oblivion of light, a talent's longing, a binding, All were chants that appeared in the Wrath storyline. But by then, she had been completely corrupted. Cold, and it was too late. In the game, after failure, it would transition into battle. But now everything is set 10 years earlier, so maybe it's not too late. Alon stretched and complained. One of the 5 death flags has been diffused, so is it time for the next one now? Thinking that a single chant could befriend a monster is laughable. But after all, they're a race that worships the otherworldly, so it's possible it works. Those in the extremist ranks of the cult are truly hard to fathom in their thinking. Elsewhere, Yusha sat silently holding the letter. Evan was startled. The mana source still emanating from the girl was absurd, but the girl carried a strange quality, as if she had no emotion at all. She spoke. "You sent that letter, didn't you, Lord Alon? Why didn't he call me to his side?" He panicked inwardly. What the hell is this? Evan stammered, that. He looked at Yusha. Mana manifesting visibly like that should only happen at a master tier. He remembered the man's words. "Because the time isn't right yet." Evan rushed to say, "Oh right, it's because it's not the right time." She withdrew her killing intent. The letter's content, remember this. The sorrow of shadow, the oblivion of light will gradually fade. Yusha was moved. Surely that was a promise only the master knew. All right, I roughly understand. He was terrified, sweat running down his body from vigilance. She smiled ominously. "I will obey his will. As for you," lying in bed, Alon thought, "today has been truly satisfying. Even the bright moon seems to cheer me on. I have to do my best for the next round." Over here, a pile of books fell from the shelf onto Alon's head. He squatted on the floor and groaned. "There's nothing here either. Hunting down clues about the third danger is giving me a headache." Evan ran over and said, "Young master, we've rescued the second child you mentioned." A bump was forming on his head now. He said, "Really? You made sure to treat the child kindly, right?" He replied, "Of course. After that child left the illegal slave market." Suddenly the door was kicked open. An aggressive guy entered and said, "Isn't this the place?" This was the second young master of the Palacio Count's house. Yo, he nudged him and said, "Why is an illiterate like you holding a book? Oh right, I heard you've been studying lately, haven't you?" He glared, "Where's your brother?" Alon thought to himself, he's always a nuisance. How did I put up with this before? I really want to fight back, but he immediately acted obedient, bowed his head and said, "Seems like you still want to use the library, then I'll take my leave first." Tonio stepped on his head triumphantly. "You know your place, huh?" Suddenly a knife flew past him. Looking closely, the knife was embedded in the wall. At that moment someone entered from afar and said coldly, "You insects are making too much noise." Tonio felt extremely irritated. The eldest young master approached, pointed at them and said sternly, "I don't want to see blood so early in the morning, so get out." This was Leo Palacio, the eldest young master. Immediately the two of them lunged at each other. "Brother, I told you to drop that rude attitude when entering the library." Leo replied, "Get out while you still can." Alon quietly slipped away on the side. The Palacio domain disappeared from the game quickly. Alon recalled his mission. Investigate the Palacio territory of the Kingdom Asteria. It was a place full of vices, led by an organization called Avalon, but their power was greater than he expected. Basically, these despicable brothers were vying for the head of the family. One was a major underworld figure, the other ran a large-scale drug syndicate. Alon thought to himself that, for the sake of his life, he couldn't confront those two, so he and Evan silently let the two beat each other up and slipped out quietly. Inside the library, fierce fighting rang out non-stop, objects flying everywhere. Evan straightened his hair for him. Alon thought to himself that he'd live happily as the weak, useless, illegitimate son. After that he went back to his room and complained wearily. Still, the second child was far from ordinary. Alon, relaxing, turned to look at him curiously. Evan wondered, how could someone like him know about the illegal slave market and the secret biological experiments happening in other lands? How on earth did he find out? On the other side, he yawned lazily, seeming hard to control himself, still lying in bed complaining. "I'm so tired." Evan blurted out, "Young master, you're really strange. You sent that child to the orphanage." Alon didn't look at him. He wondered to himself, did he say that child isn't ordinary? That boy wasn't just extraordinary. He carried a level of destruction within an empire formed by an alliance of many nations, centered on the kingdom of Kalyan. The child we rescued from the illegal slave market was the second reincarnation in Psyche Deliria, Deus Macalan. After being sold into slavery and abused, moved from place to place, he became the embodiment of one of the 5 great sins, sloth. He transformed like a demon, and then annihilated nations in the most horrific ways imaginable. At this stage of the storyline, many players were shocked by the game's brutality. Contrary to the title Sloth, he was actually extremely diligent and would repay kindness and harm many times over. That's why I emphasized to Evan to treat Deus kindly. He trembled, holding his teacup, and exclaimed, "It's so vivid." Alon calmly said, "The reason I sent him to the orphanage is because it's not time yet." Evan replied, "I suspected as much. So the letter you sent Yusha was about the second child." Alon recalled the letter and answered, "Yes, and I also included some casual talk. I told her to take care of the frail child I sent." The boy's figure there looked very lonely, his body covered in wounds. At that moment, small feet approached. A voice sounded from behind Deus. "You're broken." The voice remained calm. It was the trace of that thing. His hand moved slightly. Yusha appeared before Deus touched him and asked, "You're Black Yang, right?" She smiled and continued, "Yet the great moon still chose you. Congratulations." Yusha gave a witch-like sinister smile as powerful magic radiated from her whole body. "So feel the power bestowed upon you and let your potential be unleashed." She reached toward Deus and smiled. "If you keep your loyalty and follow his orders, you'll get your revenge." At that moment, strands of magic began to emanate from behind him. Yusha smiled and looked up at the letter. "Now I should send my first reply." Under the moonlight, Alon's written lines appeared. She wanted to send him a gentle greeting. At the Count's mansion where they lived, Evan opened the door and stepped in. Alon was still muttering. "So where is the third person?" he suddenly said. "Big trouble, sir." Evan continued. "That bastard, no, I mean the second young master." Alon looked up at the sound. "What?" He asked if that guy was dead. At this moment, the second young master's death had occurred suddenly. He wondered, really. After that, everyone gathered at the venue for the second young master's funeral. Two beautiful girls stood on either side of Count Palacio, cooing, "Master." The other one complained too. "When will this end? I'm so bored." The one beside her added, "I'm hungry." Alon was speechless, bringing drugs and women to your son's funeral. This family is rotten, real dark fantasy material. Alon looked down at his older brother. In any case, Tonio dying from an accidental fall was different from what he remembered. In the game, the guy beside him was the killer. In the end, he wailed, "After 50 years, I finally killed that vermin. Now I'm the rightful heir. I am Count Palacio." He wept and looked elated, as if this were a tremendous opportunity. Alon glanced over helplessly. "At least hide your emotions." The mastermind was definitely Leo or his cronies. Anyway, he still just needed to deal with the 5 great sins. Time jumped ahead 1 year. The succession issue was settled. Leo consolidated the drug business, and the Count's domain became noticeably more peaceful. At that time, Alon and Evan sat facing each other. He ate while thinking about the stack of papers in front of him. Meanwhile, Yusha and he had become pen pals. Keeping in touch with her could be useful in the future. In the letter, Yusha began, "Yuna is great at hide-and-seek, Hidden is great at fighting. Deus is growing normally, and the boy likes puppetry." Alon read and smiled softly. The kid seemed well-behaved. At the bottom was this month's sponsor list. Alon exclaimed, "The list grew again?" It was interesting that more sponsors kept appearing for that small orphanage. Evan noted it was odd, but ultimately a good thing. "Oh, right, about what you've been searching for," Evan said. "I got a call from the Information Guild. They've found a lead." Hearing that, he said between bites, "Really? What a relief. It's probably a list of names connected to the third boss. Finally, I can find him." At that moment, light from the window flooded the room. The two fell silent, each occupied with his own task. Elsewhere, a blood-curdling scream rang out. It came from the Margate drug distribution point. 2 men walked and talked. "The Palacio fish is generous. He always gives us fat rewards." The other replied, "That's right, our organization now has a few hundred members. Before them were people who had just been murdered, and it was about to get worse." Seeing the scene, they panicked and screamed, "Sir, my hands are out of control, help." Then a horror unfolded. Everyone there suddenly took their own lives. The screams echoed. Nearby, a shadowy figure stood silently in the dark. Yusha appeared behind them and said, "I loved the puppet show tonight. Looks like there are more reports to file." Yusha appeared behind them and said, "I loved the puppet show tonight. Looks like there are more reports to file." Yusha turned and asked, "So do you pity them?" Deus replied, "They used others to make drugs. I just don't know if this links to my hatred." She answered, "Of course it helps. We're clearing space for his return." Yusha gave a wicked smile. "How could we let this place look shabby when he returns?" Deus responded expressionlessly, "Understood." Then the two activated magic. A swirling wind rose and they vanished, like phantoms drifting in the night, everything proceeding according to his will. A light flashed brilliant in the night. Under the peaceful crescent moon, Yusha's voice rose. "We, Lam and Gayat, will be his sword." There was no one left there, only a deep hole in the ground. 2 years had passed since becoming pen pals with Yusha. Evan dragged his weary body toward the backyard. "I'm back, so you were in the backyard," Alon said nonchalantly. "Oh my Evan, you startled me." He signaled and said, "The 5th child has been safely sent to the orphanage." Alon was astonished to hear that. In the meantime, the other 3 sinners had already been rescued. He handed food to Evan. "Here, eat." "Yes, thank you, sir." As Alon handed Evan the food, he thought about how to find the 3rd child. Greed would be a bit tricky, but with a gamer's knowledge, after squeezing Evan dry, everything finally went smoothly. After giving him the food, he said, "You did well running around like that. You can rest a bit now." Evan asked, "Is the orphanage mission over?" Alon replied casually, "Yeah, it's done, thank goodness." Evan lay back and sighed, asking, "But young master, aren't you happy?" "Of course," Alon answered. He said Evan didn't look it. He pointed at his mouth. "I'm smiling now." Then he put on a very perfunctory smile. "Let's just say that." Sunlight filtered down as he stretched and breathed in. Alon lay on the grass, musing. "This is progressing better than I thought. Everything's going smoothly." The masters of the awakened beings all became the 5 great sins after a past tragedy. Although this was set in their past, before they awakened into sins, the chance to rescue all of them perfectly before the tragedy occurred was very slim. Rescuing them after they had become sins would be even more worrisome. He asked, "How's the orphanage?" Evan produced the letter. "Everything's as usual. Everything is going smoothly." Evan continued, "The children at first were like broken dolls." He added they'd brightened up a bit. Alon opened the letter. "Really? Then we won't need any more caregivers." He thought he hadn't expected Yusha to do so well. Maybe it's because her character is tied to the Moon Orphanage. She definitely hates interference. Alon called Evan over. "If you see it that way, Yusha is also a good child. So is there anything special about them?" In the letter, Yusha wrote, "Everyone is well. Some of the children here are growing up very pretty. You really don't need to worry about the orders anymore, nor about the children you just sent." After reading the letter, Alon was truly glad to see they were all being well cared for. He thought that if all 5 sins grew up normally, environment really mattered. Evan asked, "So when do you plan to meet the kids? You always say you'll make time for that." Alon stammered, outwardly hesitant, but actually he had no intention of meeting them directly. Being close to them would be beneficial in many ways, but perhaps because the process of becoming a sin was so horrific and tragic, their personalities, as seen in the game's flashbacks, were terrifying even as children. He considered carefully. Since he rescued them before awakening, it should be better, but it still felt frightening. He stammered, "Maybe next year is fine, I get it." Alon exhaled. Anyway, from now on, in this horribly dark fantasy world, what he needed was some self-defense skills. He thought magic required talent, and he happened to have it. Evan spoke up, "But young master, have you heard of Lam and Guyot?" Alon replied, "Never heard of them." Evan explained, "They're an organization that's become famous recently, specialized in hunting down criminal groups." Alon asked, "Like trash cleanup? Sounds like a good thing." But inwardly he thought this wasn't the setup he knew, so they'd probably disappear soon. Evan said gravely, "But now they're even killing nobles. That's why I thought you should know about them." Alon called to him, "Evan, starting today you'll sleep next to my room." Night was falling. Moonlight bathed the mansion as voices rose. "Now let's hear the weekly report on Lam and Guyot's activities, yeah." Yusha nodded and spoke softly. Up north, Xiaoling cheerfully reported that he'd handled everything. He said casually, "The heads of those slave traders have been dealt with. I love this outfit, I had it made." He told them if they could guess my eye color, they'd live, but no one knew it. Rhine added, "All the bodies were buried properly." Raiden, seated on the stairs, said, "The south is done too. The illegal human laboratories and the troublesome Avalon were torn apart, leaving no trace." Yusha smiled wickedly. "Good, everything is going according to his plan. We exist for the glory of the Great Moon. They are all part of the secret Lam and Guyot organization, worshippers of the Great Moon. However, a problem has arisen." Yusha said, "Under his directive, everything is perfect, so how can there be a problem?" Our letter 1EA5T Mu reported that the leader of Avalon is the Count's eldest son. During the Southern Purge, a dangerous document was uncovered. It seems the Count's eldest son is plotting against him. This surprised Yusha, but she showed little outward reaction. What? A malevolent power radiated from her. Indeed, even those nearby trembled before it. She held the paper up. After the Count fell ill, someone had silently poisoned him. She crushed the paper in anger. "Damn, you were right." 2 years later, just as predicted, Count Palacio died. The official cause was announced as cardiac arrest, but given the drug abuse leading to his death, it was obvious. A voice rang out, "What? Lam and Guyot again?" Alon listened silently. "Yes, they assassinated him at night. Another assassination." Alon thought they seemed to be getting more cautious about Lam and Guyot. Moreover, the Count's funeral had no mourners. It ended quietly in utter silence. Everyone left coldly. Evan asked, "Young master, what should we do?" "Next year the commoner, the eldest son, will inherit the title. What's with all this luggage?" Alon was packing. "You're moving too." Evan was startled. "Leave." Are you going to abandon the mansion? Alon replied, not exactly, we're heading south. After they packed, Evan asked, south, you mean Rodmel, right? They plan to move to a small village in the southern part of the Palacio territory, Rodmel. Meanwhile, someone stood on the upper floor, watching his every move. Leo had been watching from start to finish, but said nothing. The delicious fried eggs and toast sizzled in the two happily fried eggs until everyone's mouths watered. But that cheerful life didn't last long. After 3 days, the two had to return to the Count's mansion. Alon ruffled his hair and complained, now what? Another funeral for the eldest son. He said gloomily, I can't believe we have to come back to this blood-stained place. The signs of death this time are different. How is he dead? Alon looked at Leo lying in the coffin. The cause of death was a sword thrust to the heart. Alon thought, who could do this? Who killed Leo? At that moment, Leo turned and asked about the cause of death. The guards were immediately terrified, jolting in fear. Sorry for starring, sir. Alon was stunned too, not understanding why they suddenly acted that way. He quietly passed through the crowd. Evan followed and called, young master. He asked softly, Evan, have you found anything? Well, about that, young master, maybe. Evan whispered, are you the one who wiped out Avalon in a single night? Alon heard that and turned to look at the servants milling around, only to see their confused expressions. A few days earlier, during the trip to Rodmel, Evan said, by the way, young master, if you're leaving, why not choose a better city? Alon thought inwardly, no, absolutely not. Rodmel is the final location in my plan. He had saved the 5 great sins from their circumstances and prevented the future destruction of the world. Rodmel had no ties to the original storyline and even had a Palacio villa, a perfect place to live comfortably like a noble, to enjoy a sweet life. Alon said in a low voice, there's a reason for everything. Evan immediately interrupted, I'm not falling for that again. You always pretend not to care when something bothering you. Alon clicked his tongue. Fine, let it be. The carriage rolled out of the Count's estate. Leo had witnessed it all, wondering to himself whether he should kill him or not. After all, whether he stayed or not was pointless. Leo had considered removing him with poison after his father's death, but then thought that since he'd quietly gone toward the border, there was no longer a reason to kill him. He reasoned to himself that maybe because Avalon's affairs had been going poorly lately, he was just a nuisance. Leo gripped the railing tightly, still holding on to something. Then he ordered his servant Almond to follow the carriage. Almond, Leo's right-hand man, asked, so you want me to kill him? Leo was surprised by the question. What? But Almond coldly followed the order without complaint. Suddenly he asked again, making Leo displeased. Your task is to obey me. No sooner had he spoken than Leo was stabbed in the chest with a sword, his voice trembling. You, how dare you betray me? The other said, I've had my fill of enjoying this civil war. But the person was Almond. It was hidden. A member of Lam and Guyot, not Almond. So far so good, we've been taught by the Blood Moon. Lam and Guyot is his sword. We act according to his will. But if anyone dares harm the Great Moon, we will take action on our own. Saying that, he drove the blade deeper into Leo, then decisively pulled the sword out. Blood splattered across the floor. Watching Leo collapse, he continued, That's why I've been waiting for you to say those words all this time. I didn't expect it to take 2 years. Keep threatening. My people won't let you leave safely. With what you just said, Avalon will now vanish from the continent forever. He even sounded regretful. What a pity. The Great Moon gave you a chance. Having said that, he leapt over the balcony and disappeared. Dawn began to break. The sun rose as always, and Rodmel truly was a paradise. Alon woke up cheerfully. Good morning. He looked over the peaceful day unfolding, eating when he wanted, and enjoying the foods he liked. Finally, he could enjoy the life of a true noble. While eating, he thought, maybe I should start a bakery. Evan entered holding a letter. Young master, there's a letter for you. Taking it, Alon wondered, what is this? The slice of bread in his hand fell onto the table. The letter said that after Leo's death, Palace I.O. requested his return, and the Free Paradise days ended after only 3 days. So Alon sadly stood at his brother's funeral, returning to the mansion once more. Looking at the frightened people before him, he wondered why everyone reacted that way. Evan said, young master, since when did you become the mastermind behind wiping out Avalon? Alon was puzzled by the question. Thinking back, he realized he'd fallen into a repeating simulation, full of crazy situations. Alon curled up in a corner, feeling sad. Hey, Duong Dung, can you explain to me in a way I can understand why I became the mastermind? Evan calmly said, because you were the only survivor. Leo was murdered right after we left the mansion, giving you the perfect alibi and making you the heir. Alon froze on hearing that, realizing the problem. Evan continued to explain. Avalon disappeared. There's no one left to dispute Leo's death. And just like that, you became the mastermind behind the case with a master swordsman under your command. Happy now? What's with that outfit? Alon thought, God, when did I start all this? No organization could wipe out an underworld boss that fast. Alon asked, didn't you say there was an organization that hunts other organizations? You mean Lamb and Guyot? Yes, but you think that's right. Evan said the intelligence network reported otherwise. They said Lamb and Guyot leaves no bodies behind, only a mark, while Avalon's members were all killed by the sword, like a scene from hell. That's why I'm seen as the mastermind with a swordsman expert under me. Indeed, Lamb and Guyot doesn't appear in the game. No weak group vanishes before the main plot starts. So who was it? Yusha here interrogated. Any traces? Yusha here asked again. Any traces? Xiaoling also spoke up. Me too. He laughed triumphantly. It's nothing but corpses in there. The door opened. A familiar voice rang out. We're here. Deus's men arrived as well. Avalon's remaining force numbered 486. Deus spoke exactly as the boss intended. He grinned, we cut them in half. Yusha, after hearing everyone's report, was extremely pleased. Perfect. And so, Avalon, the giant organization that once dominated the kingdom of Asteria, turned to dust in just 5 days. Deus interrupted. However, it seems the cleanup isn't finished. What do you mean? He held up a stack of documents. I found more nobles connected to Avalon. The Duchy of Altia seems deeply involved. After hearing this, Yusha was silent for a moment. She opened the files Deus handed her, exuding her usual menace. You know what I'm about to say, don't you? Everyone understood her implication. No one spoke further. Deus said, let's quietly deal with them. Yusha exhaled, then turned to Rhine. The Intelligence Guild has confirmed everything, right? Rhine held the paper. Yes, they're treating this incident as unrelated to Lamb and Guyot. Deus added, other guilds say the same, they call it a swordsman's hell. Yusha asked, do we continue surveillance? She smiled faintly. Keep watching and absolutely do not touch that person. I've said it countless times, everyone knows. He made the papers hover and said, but because that person's kin tried to act first, this case isn't an order. Remember, we are a sword. Hearing this, Yusha brightened, covered her face and said, a sword doesn't get to think for itself, right? Her eyes flashed red. Looking toward the window, she said, Lamb and Guyot must act on command. Remember, this person knows everything. The 4 others across the room tensed and looked up. Her voice was resolute. Never let that person down. Deus looked at Yusha, puzzled. I don't get it. Why is someone as superior as Yusha anxious and restless just because they've been found out? Then he raised the stack of papers and said, I understand now. It's all because of the great moon. Because of that person. Meanwhile, at the Count's manor, lights were still on inside. Alon sat at his desk and complained, I can't take it anymore. He looked up, tears streaming down his face. After the funeral, he'd been unbearably busy for a month. Alon grumbled, I just want to relax and live off money. That's what a noble should do. He bowed his head thinking, although I've made many enemies, Leo's death should have happened 6 years later. But because of my brother's death, the game's timeline changed, and all the family's duties fell on me. At that moment, the heir suddenly heard a call. Young Viscount, the elders enter at once. Each held a pile of items in their hands, books or scrolls. Seeing this, he sighed even more. Dark circles under Alon's eyes were now obvious. He wondered why everyone worked so hard. When the Count was alive, they were leisurely and often cut corners. From afar, the elders saw his gloomy face and panicked, waving. Is he angry? We must work harder. We don't want to die. His complexion grew paler from overwork. The vassals were surely working seriously because of the rumors that he was the mastermind. I told you to come. Why didn't you? Now Alon was a small company's slave, working silently. In his heart, he wished they'd handle everything themselves. Scene change. Flames flare up and slowly roast the food. Evan asked the young master, puzzled, looking up. I have to say I'm really surprised. Alon was now manipulating magic to fly around the room. Evan continued. To reach rank 2 after only 2 years of self-study, your talent is outstanding. When did you develop like this? Normally, it takes about 4 years to reach rank 2, and magic is unusable, unless you were born with blessed bamboo. He replied calmly, maybe I have some talent. I trained hard to protect myself because I was worried. Alon thought to himself that this technique also required very precise mana control. He kept controlling the magic to fly around, but the important thing was it still wasn't complete. Fatigue showed on his face. He'd never imagined he'd actually use magic in a fantasy world. He murmured, at first I was excited, thinking once the plan was finished there'd be no more danger, so I'd slow down my studies. Then the magic orb rose, but lately survival had become a real issue. He realized a painful truth that brought him to the verge of tears. His mana well was tiny. Alon complained that nothing was effective. At this point he recalled information about it. A person's mana well is fixed from birth, like an athlete's physique being set from the start, and his mana well was so small that thinking about it caused him great pain. He realized the truth. It was so tiny that training wouldn't help. Sitting and eating, he thought, if every other way fails, there's one more option. At that moment, Evan picked up the letter and said, "Oh, right, an invitation to a dance has arrived for the young master." Hearing that, he turned to look toward the ballroom. Just then the ball had arrived, held at a luxurious house. Around them, the nobles were already present. He wore his viscount's attire and entered with Evan. As soon as he stepped in, he sighed, "Phew, I'm tired already." This was just a routine ball for networking among nobles, held in the southern region of the Kingdom of Asteria. Since he's about to become a count soon, he should take this chance to build a few connections. Alon adjusted the scarf at his neck and walked in. Evan behind him munched on a pile of food and asked, "What are you doing?" He thought to himself that mingling with nobles was important for his peaceful future. But as Alon approached, everyone around was terrified by his demeanor and hurriedly avoided him. Then he reached out to greet a nearby man, who immediately panicked, and the whole crowd scattered as if chased by a ghost. Evan couldn't help but laugh and reassure him, "Don't be too upset, haha, don't be sad." He watched and thought, sad, not really. "I expected this," so he said, "Evan, I'm leaving." With that, he turned and walked away. "I knew I'd be ignored because my dignity isn't like the glory of our ancestors. Now I'm just the black sheep of the East." But he didn't come unprepared. Alon lifted his wine glass, thinking he'd handle the situation with the social skills he'd secretly practiced. He said, "This wine has a distinctive taste." A nearby girl turned to look but froze in fear. He added in a low voice, "Especially the aroma seems different." Alon smiled slightly, looking demonic. "I want to drink a few bottles at home." Yet inwardly he thought it was a gentle smile, the sort needed for socializing. The girl across saw his face and went pale, trembling, then fled in panic. "I'll talk to my father and prepare it right away." Alon watched in bewilderment, thinking, wait, not that. People behind were whispering about Alon. They said he threatened her to get a limited edition bottle, worse than his brothers, more of a thug. Evan next to him slapped his shoulder to stifle a laugh. He still tried to deny reality. She must be the shy type. After that, they left. Evan said, "Your spoils just went up again." He munched and listed an impressive set of items. A fine horse from Paldean, Fenian orange tea, metal forged by Valanda, and Malatino specialty wine. Quite an impressive list. Meanwhile, the protagonist was still brooding. Turns out the name Palacio has a worse reputation than he thought. Rumor had it he'd killed his rotten brothers. He'd become someone everyone avoided. Goodbye socializing. Maybe only I see it that way, or maybe I've grown more distant from people, he said wearily. "I'll go get some air." Evan stood silent and said, "Yes." Behind them, a red-haired girl watched him quietly. She looked at him as if deep in thought, then went outside and leaned on the railing to gaze at the view. He kept wondering, where did things go wrong? Just then a voice called out, "Hello, may I speak with you for a moment?" Alon startled and turned. "Someone spoke to me, who is it?" But when he looked back, there was no one in sight. Then suddenly a voice rang out again. He jumped and looked down. A small girl had appeared before him. She introduced herself. "Loria, the third daughter of Duke Altia." Hearing the name, he thought to himself, "Altia, of course." Alon said, "Yes, hello. The Altia house is one of the three great villains of the Northern Court, the black sheep of the North." Alon thought inwardly that anyone who approaches him first is not normal. He looked at the girl and wondered, why don't I remember her? He didn't recall seeing her in the game. Loria suddenly spoke up. "I'll be frank. Please lend me your strength." At that, Alon's face before her grew terrifying and gloomy. Loria, flustered, continued, "I'm about to be assassinated." Her words floated in the night, strangely gentle. Loria's expression was full of panic as she looked up. Alon heard that and thought to himself that he'd received his father's affection and had always been protected like a favored child. Duke Altia had fallen gravely ill. She said in panic, "But now..." Altia hesitated and continued, "My half-sisters are about to kill me." He wondered, so it's all just a survival struggle. Alon looked down and realized, no wonder I don't remember her, because she died when the game began. Loria pleaded urgently, "If it's your power, Alon, please." But he responded, "I refuse." Loria tried to continue, "I'm not asking you to help me for free. If you help me, I'll give you half of House Altia." But he turned and said, "Very well, I take my leave." Alon thought to himself that though she was pitiable, just keeping his own life was hard enough. He shouldn't invite more trouble. Even if he wanted to help, it wouldn't be like the rumors. He had no special ability. Alon couldn't help but look back at the lone figure standing there. Loria's face was sad and silent. He rubbed his neck, exhaled, and turned back, thinking something good is about to happen for her, hoping she will find a good ally. Then he entered the party, where two figures in black cloaks were talking in a corner. "So Altia is moving closer to the Great Moon? I should let Red Moon know good things are coming for that person." The woman beside him said, "You don't need to. If the intel is correct, she's the only one in House Altia not tied to Avalon. They above are watching Logia, meaning she's not a target of Raiden. The other turned away. That's fine then. All the other Altias will be dealt with. Yes, by Red Moon's orders. We'll focus on cutting information channels, so the Avalon incident never reaches him. They above silently observed Alon below. At the party, he sighed inwardly. It feels so empty around here. Am I surrounded by some kind of barrier? Alon didn't notice a mysterious girl nearby. She spoke. Hello. Hearing someone start a conversation moved Alon. Was that addressed to me? Really? Could I actually make friends with nobles this time? He turned and said, Yes, hello. The girl held a fan to her mouth and smiled faintly. Seeing that, he immediately thought, Again, another shady one. I've seen this face in the game. Looking at her, he thought, Anyone who approaches me first certainly isn't an ordinary noble. Recognizing her, he stepped forward. Hello, Miss Zenonia. Kalia, surprised that he knew her, said, Oh my, you know me. He replied calmly, Of course you're quite famous. The three most notorious villain houses in the kingdom of Asteria. To the north is House Altia, to the east is House Palacio, and finally to the west is the district of debauchery. She evokes the image of a noble serpent. Kalia smiled faintly. Famous? Me? She is the eldest daughter of Viscount Zenonia. Viscount Zenonia. If Palacio is a criminal gang, Zenonia is the upscale version, a legalized crime syndicate. Thinking that, Alon shuddered. I only need a few noble connections to live peacefully, he vowed silently. Even with half my life hanging by a thread, for this sweet life I must avoid getting involved with them. Someone teased because Kalia was so beautiful. She replied gently, Thank you for the compliment. Kalia smiled and added, I'd love to talk more, what do you think? Alon answered calmly, I would too, but there are too many eyes watching. Inwardly he begged, Please let me leave quietly. Kalia looked at him and said something cryptic, just as the rumor said. Then she turned and said, I look forward to seeing you again soon. The line sounded puzzling. After that, Kalia walked away. He stood there dumbfounded, not understanding what had just happened. Above, two observers looking down said, Avalon District is completely locked down. The other added, But now a new person has appeared. They looked toward the window where someone hidden in a tree was still watching. A tail, huh? Then two small figures quickly dashed off. Without direct orders, they only observed, ready to act later if needed. Scene change, Evan scratched his head in confusion. Young master, are you sure this time is for real? They stood before a canyon. Evan doubted. Is this the place we've been looking for all along? He looked inside. Although it was midday, the place was oddly dark, everyone's faces tense as if about to ascend. He clenched his fists, finally found it. This is the real target. The ambient effects match. It must be here. Evan complained, If this turns out fake again, I'll go into a depression. They entered while scanning around. The stone slabs bore inscriptions, he replied. This time it's the real deal. In the game, this spot was much easier to find. Actually, the reason he trudged all the way here under the guise of a recon mission was the southern maze. That maze is called the Whispering Maze. Solve all the puzzles in the 8 rooms, and you'll receive a precious relic as a reward. Alon smiled and looked ahead. I still remember all the instructions and that rush of grinding for loot. Before them stood a massive gate, covered in strange characters. He looked up in awe at seeing the maze entrance in real life. Although he'd grown tired of it in game, standing before it felt totally different. Evan exclaimed in surprise, This canyon looks like it was carved by hand. How do you know places like this? Alon looked up and said, I've been here many times. He found that odd. You've been here many times. Alon grinned. Just kidding, I have my own ways. Let's go. Seeing his serious face, Evan cried out, Please don't say things like that with such a straight face. As soon as they entered, they heard a monster roaring above. Its massive hands clenched, producing a terrible sound. Evan looked around in awe. In a place like this, get one wrong and you get crushed. Alon silently assessed as the horrifying sounds continued. Evan stared at his blank expression while he was writing something on a stone tablet. How could he be so calm? He watched him jot notes intently, puzzled even in this situation. Evan recalled the 4 years they'd spent together and still couldn't figure out his young master. No two missions were the same. From paying off someone else's debt, helping a slave rescue an orphan, dismantling a demonic organization, to delivering a meaningless letter. At that moment, the monster still hadn't finished. He grew more baffled. Yet his master knew this place inside out without ever leaving home. Alon calmly pointed at the monster. The puzzle's solved, but it hasn't opened yet. We have to wait for that thing to finish. The sounds kept ringing. Evan kept thinking. Still, following this mysterious young master always led to good results. They both looked over and he said, Oh, it's opening. He wondered silently. "What are you planning this time, young master?" Deep down, Alon silently cheered. The door was finally opening. "Oh God, I feel like throwing up. I knew this place was tough, but didn't expect it to be this brutal." Evan almost broke his neck trying not to look, and before them lay a heap of jewels lighting up the entire room. Evan shouted, "Finally done, huh?" Alon replied calmly, "Yeah, grab the black ring and let's go." In the distance, 6 rings were mounted on a fake hand. Evan said, "That looks useless as hell." Alon picked up the black ring. "It's a bit big, but touching the others will only bring more trouble. Leave them be." He stared at the ring in silence, thinking to himself that he finally had the restraining band. Alon reassured him again, "Don't worry, the way back is safe." Evan stammered, "Yes." Walking, he mused that thanks to remembering the game's guide, this was too easy, though his expression wasn't great. "Young master, did you plan all this in advance?" Before them stood a group of giant golems. Apparently the canyon's bronze stones were golems. Evan worriedly calculated, "Unknown enemies, great. At least we need a way to get you out of here." Alon stepped forward and said, "I'll handle this one." Evan blinked in confusion. At that moment the monsters all turned toward them. Evan warned, "Whatever you plan, priority one is getting out of here." A golem lunged to attack. He shouted, "Wait, a second-tier spell won't be enough." At that instant Alon murmured, "Binding, activate." The ring on his finger flashed black. Immediately after, the golems began to change, light flaring over them. A voice rang out in the air. "Fragment inheriting the great will of Enmar Lala, state the 2 limits you can develop." Alon stood in the pitch-black space, looking around. In the game, a choice window would appear here, so that voice was the same. A giant face materialized in the darkness, the reward for clearing the binding maze. True to its name, it was an artifact that absorbs power for the user, but in return imposes strict bindings. Alon trembled, slightly tense. The voice sounded so real, as if he were truly inside that world. He stated the first limit, and the voice asked again. Alon formed a seal and answered, "In all operations, the hand seals of Babylonia are absolutely mandatory." The voice asked, "What do you wish to gain from this binding?" He replied, "The power to bend the world's rules a little further." Streams of power in the air intertwined. Evan looked up at the pitch-black scene. Light slowly appeared, and the voice spoke again, "The second limit." Alon formed another seal. "In all operations, only the sacred tongue of Babylonia shall be used." The voice asked, "And what do you desire from this binding?" He replied calmly, "The same as before." The voice fell silent for a moment. Alon looked up, puzzled. "Damn, did I mess up a step?" The skill icon mimicked it exactly, selecting both hand seals and the sacred tongue as limits to gain the strongest offensive power. He couldn't help sweating with worry. I'd perfected the seals and incantations from repeating them countless times. This time has to work. Then the voice accepted. A vague voice proclaimed, "O human, remember the seals and runes of the great forgotten god. We give thanks to the one who succeeds his will." Alon felt uneasy. Succeed his will? What does that mean? Immediately the ring on his hand vanished. He guessed it was being absorbed into him. It seemed the binding had succeeded. The voice spoke one last time. "I have always watched you. You inherit that will." Back in reality, Evan was still shouting, "Young master, second-tier spell." Before him were the massive monsters. He reached out anxiously, but it wasn't enough. Alon looked up calmly, his eyes without a ripple, his hand beginning to initiate magic. The iron orb that should have shone brilliantly only flickered weakly despite him pouring all his mana into it. No matter how much he trained, he couldn't surpass the limit. Then it was time to test the binding's power, and the price it demanded. With that thought, the protagonist formed a magic sphere in the palm of his hand. The sphere continued to accumulate. As the monsters charged, Alon raised his hand to steer the magic sphere straight ahead. Time to test it. Alon immediately brought out the orb. Next came the countershock technique, bolts of lightning striking the cavern's ley lines. The sphere grew ever brighter, blazing in the dim, muffled space. With a blue light technique, the orb swelled and spun, firing off a volley of lightning bolts around it. And finally, the linear diffraction maneuver. Alon deftly executed the hand movements for the spells. A powerful current surged from his hand. The electricity shot straight into the ones chasing them. Evan watched the scene dumbfounded, utterly amazed. Evan watched the scene dumbfounded, utterly amazed. The electricity hadn't fully dissipated. The giant stone men were struck immobile, drained of strength. Alon and Evan stood on the cliff and watched in silence. After only a few seconds of quiet, another electrical storm rose, sweeping the remaining stone giants. Their limbs came apart, shattering. The lightning flashed and then faded. Looking down, the two saw the giants reduced to piles of broken rock. Alon's face showed no expression, while Evan was still stunned, unconsciously exclaiming, "Damn, I can't believe it." They waited for the electricity below the cliff to clear before descending together. Along the way, Evan nagged Alon, Have you been hiding your real strength this whole time? Alon replied coolly. Impossible. Evan didn't believe it and pressed. What? I've been a mercenary for 15 years and I've never seen anything like that. You're saying that was really just a second-tier magic. But he only got the bland 2 words. Yes, that's right, from Alon, leaving him speechless. Despite Alon's cold, expressionless face, his mind was swirling. I didn't expect it either. It wasn't that strong in the game. If I remember correctly, in Psyche Deliria's turn-based combat system, magic can be enhanced each turn by seals or incantations. A turn-based combat system. Each time you win and complete a battle, the avatar in the virtual world gets a 10% attack boost. And in the fight just now with the stone giants, this was a chained examination spell using 4 seals and incantations. It had been enhanced over 5 turns. The more he thought, the more Alon unconsciously replayed the moves he'd used. He'd used a total of 4 techniques. The accumulated lightning was amplified simultaneously to form a configuration suited for a large area judgment spell. In return, the restriction was that each spell had to use the master seals and incantations, but the payoff was overwhelmingly greater power. Thinking this, Alon faintly heard a strange voice in his head. "O forgotten mortal who still remembers the seals and mysteries of the great god, we thank you for inheriting his will." Thinking it over, he drew a conclusion for himself. That's probably why the magic was amplified so many times. Throughout the walkout, Alon's mind churned. Nevertheless, this second-tier magic's power was excessive, far beyond expectations. Even he was surprised. Evan followed behind and finally exhaled, grateful. "We're finally out." He sat down exhausted on a stone bench, leaning against the cliff, muttering. This was more tiring than fighting. In his weary mood, Evan half scolded, half asked Alon, "Who in the world came up with a place this brutal?" Alon didn't answer. He scanned the area and fell into thought. Come to think of it, the Whispering Maze has another name. According to info found online, it spread through the community via shared maps and guidebooks. The buzz about this maze on social media is huge. What is the Palayon Maze? Everyone keeps saying Palayon, Palayon. What the hell is that? The Whispering Maze is a mid-level grind area in the game. According to the director, that maze has an owner and you can grind there endlessly if you skip the reward. So when did it start being called Palayon's Maze? The question nagged at Alon until he blurted it out. When did it start being called Palayon's Maze? Evan, half listening and not understanding, asked. Sorry, what did you say? Alon didn't repeat it. He hauled Evan up and deflected. Let's head east. After 3 weeks of hard training, there's something I want to do when we get back. Hearing that, Evan sighed in resignation. What? You're more diligent than I thought. As he pulled Evan away, Alon thought. Choosing seals from the same system as a spell boosts power, and choosing the right incantation amplifies attributes. That's how the game works. But unlike the game, where visuals don't change and only attack stats increase, each victory here grants the player an additional 10% attack boost. However, in the recent fight, Alon noticed each seal altered the magic, and each incantation produced a distinct chain. Thinking that, Alon wondered, even though it was just technique, could my mana control be refined enough to sense those variations? Shaking off the jumble of thoughts, Alon finally told himself, when my mana recovers, I'll have to test it again. Anyway, things turned out fine in the end. In the dark of the deep forest, unbeknownst to Alon and Evan, Rhine, wrapped in a cloak, hid herself in the shadows. She waited until they left, then lifted her head. Swiftly, she leaped from cliff to cliff and entered the maze. When she arrived, Rhine paused. She stared at a large stone covered in rows of raised, colored script. In any case, things had turned out well, and she immediately recognized these strange characters. They were the script of the Elenif Empire. Rhine removed her hood and cloak and translated the strange inscription. It read, "For a friend about to be left alone, the sword Saint Ban stood firm." Afterwards, she lightly touched the raised, colored glyphs with her hand. Vivid images flashed through Rhine's mind. He had repelled the invasion of the Black Prince and defeated Al-Akalaka, who once devoured the hearts of his people. The radiant emperor, Great Ban lived on in his people's hearts, wielding a holy sword and valiantly fighting a savage giant dragon. Then the reel spun to Rhine herself hovering above. Books fluttered around her, and a voice echoed in her head, constantly reminding her, "I know all, for I was born with a great mission in the ancient library." Back in the present, Rhine recalled standing on the cliff watching Alon and felt she had an insight. Yes, Palatio was the one who created it. I knew the Empress was different from the one recorded in history, so I suspected something extraordinary. Images of Empress Boludia, Emperor Great Ban Alon, and Alon kept circling in Rhine's mind. She couldn't stop the thoughts racing through her. Think about it. Even the great moon once called Palatio a friend worthy of reverence. Moreover, the incantation he whispered doesn't exist in any record of the ancient library. Recalling Alon's fight with the giants, the spells he used troubled Rhine the most. She was intensely curious who exactly was that man. As she left the maze, Rhine felt a little shy and murmured, "Everything Hong and Guyot said was true. I'm ashamed that I blindly followed orders." Then her expression immediately turned cold again as usual, and she asked, confirming, "He's here." She looked up at the figure on the tree branch and asked, "Did you get the information?" Deus touched his face coldly and replied, "The man in black is dead." His neck was suddenly twisted twice in midair, and that was Alon's doing. Rhine said briefly after hearing that, "I'll have to report this so it's handled appropriately." In the dead of night, a dim moon hung over the treetops, and two figures streaked through the sky. At that moment, inside the Count Zenonia's mansion in a room, Kalia sat on the sofa, took a small sip of tea, and said absent-mindedly, "So it's not just a rumor." Kalia fell into thought and unconsciously recalled Alon, mentally nodding. "His eyes are so cold and emotionless, like a bottomless abyss." She sneered inwardly, "Famous, huh?" She leaned back on the chair and answered herself, "Indeed, Count Zenonia is powerful and renowned." Kalia's gaze darkened as she observed, "It's strange that someone as reclusive as he is considered famous." After saying that, Kalia rose and walked slowly toward the man at the desk, smiling as she asked, "Isn't that odd, father?" The man paused his writing and turned to look at her. He watched seriously as she continued, "Because you're the Count, after all." Kalia stepped closer and offered a faint, cold smile. Then she snapped her fingers. In the man's eyes, Kalia's figure twitched and wavered. He slumped helplessly, his hand holding the quill falling limp. Seeing this, Kalia was extremely pleased, smiling with satisfaction and mocking arrogance. "No one would suspect that I'm the one actually running the family while father pretends to be a fool. How could they find out?" She recalled at the banquet how Alon had no idea the watcher in the distance was her setup, and even kindly warned her that many eyes were watching. Kalia inwardly rejoiced. Even my planted spy seems to have been exposed. Just then a guard burst in, calling urgently, "Miss Kalia." She leaned against the wall, hands on hips, and asked, "What's the matter?" The guard replied immediately, "Miss, please return to your room at once." Kalia followed the guard back to the room, and upon opening the door, found the spy drenched in blood, slumped against the wall. The guard reported cautiously, "It seems the seal wasn't activated, meaning he hasn't revealed the secret." Kalia said sternly, "He deliberately placed it in my room." She paused, leaving the sentence half-finished. A few seconds later, Kalia laughed and mocked herself. "How could they have discovered this? From the moment we met, they hit me at my greatest weakness, didn't they?" Her face twisted ugly with anger. Meanwhile, Evan and Alon dozed on the carriage back. Evan's loud snoring roused Alon. He rubbed his ear groggily and drifted back to sleep. Scene change. Evening at the Altia Ducal estate. Loria sat in the carriage, terrified, thinking, sure enough, not an ordinary person. She remembered underworld figures with eyes as cold as her father's. People you should never confront. Loria sadly recalled Alon turning away coldly. He was my last lifeline, she thought. She felt full of disappointment, but thought, perhaps he wouldn't accept such a losing deal. Loria remembered how her siblings had been stripped of their wealth and power by the cruelest of kin. Tim Allen at the boys' school, Malin at the girls' school, second daughter Perrine, second son Kig. Looking at herself, she thought, because I have nothing left. Loria stared at the familiar yet strange grand house and thought, I've survived so far on my father's mercy and love. What do I do now? Either way, I have to step into that cold building. Suddenly, a loud call rang out. Miss Loria, the youngest miss, has returned. Two maidservants ran up from afar, alarmed as they reported. Miss Perrine and young Master Kig are dead. Hearing that, Loria's face drained of color. What? The image of those two flashed through her mind. People willing to stab their own family. Could it be them? That makes no sense, Loria murmured. What about Tim Allen and Malin? Immediately, a blood-curdling scream rang out. The servants rushed toward the sound. Everyone was horrified to find the two of them stabbing at each other with swords. Chaos erupted. Loria froze and wondered, what is happening? They didn't know that on the roof, a small figure had vanished in a flash. Coldly smiling, finished the job and leapt away, disappearing from sight. The servants scattered in panic, and Loria muttered to herself, her terrified face recalling Alon's odd remark when he looked back. Good things will happen. At that time, Alon's expression was terrifying, hiding in wait, concealing his claws to seize the position. The true power behind the Count's family had arrived, and she trembled with fear. You mean like him? In one night I too became the sole heir of the ducal family. After a moment, Loria exhaled. She thought to herself, I don't even know how deep the pact I signed with that unreasonable demon goes, but there's no turning back. Loria spun and resolved, What if I betray him? There have already been too many precedents. I have no choice but to keep walking the path I've chosen. Time shifted to 2 months later, at Alon's mansion. A man entered respectfully. I come on the order of Duke Altia. Alon was surprised. Duke Altia. Evan beside him peered curiously and gasped at the sight of an extremely rare bottle of wine. They said each bottle cost thousands of gold, and yet here it was to see with their own eyes. A letter was tucked alongside it. Alon was stunned. Addressed to Loria Altia, not the Duke but Loria the youngest prepared this. Why send it to me while I'm out here struggling to survive? He asked the man, is this really meant for me? The man bowed and replied, yes, the Duke prepared it personally and ordered me to deliver it by hand. Hearing that, Alon flinched. The Duke himself. Wait, so Loria the youngest, even she has become Duke Altia. At that moment, she was hunched over papers at her desk. After a while, Loria stretched. 2 months passed so quickly. She couldn't help but recall that after her father's funeral, he died of illness. She held the succession ceremony and became Duke. Loria rose, lamenting. At first, I couldn't even step into this office. She still couldn't forget that horrific night. Even though her siblings died suddenly, she avoided suspicion thanks to an alibi from the ball. At that time, even her secret organization had been eliminated by her siblings, so when she returned to the mansion, that should have been when she was most in danger. Loria couldn't help but feel confused and terrified. By the time she knew it was too late, she reeled, thinking, had he taken advantage of the whole situation? She imagined the scene again. On the surface, he refused coldly, but then he handled everything perfectly. Looking back, Loria couldn't help but feel confused. How many moves ahead had he seen? I was so afraid of bothering anyone that I didn't even announce the funeral. She walked alone through the lavish mansion. Clearly, he needed Altia for some plan, which is why he approached me. As she walked, Loria thought, even though I've consolidated the groups under Altia, it still can't compare to the power he's hiding. She suspected inwardly, he wants something else from me. Alon's image rose in her mind, a crime boss building influence through business. If it's something he lacks but I have. His image only darkened further. Alon's image rose again, a crime boss building power from business. If it's something he doesn't have but I do. His persona seems darker, manipulating politics from the shadows, Altia's reputation. Loria looked up at the portrait on the wall. For now, I have to focus on what needs to be done. She turned and stood before the Duke's portrait, thinking, my benefactor will contact me soon. Loria gave a small smile. I hope this thank you gift pleases you. On the other side, the man bowed and left the Duke's chamber. I will take my leave. Alon remained puzzled. Loria was once threatened with murder, yet now she's become a Duke. How could that be? Something's off. Evan beside him tilted his head in curiosity. Everything felt strange. Time moved forward a few months to winter. 5 years before the rules began. Alon was walking when someone suddenly called out, young master. Evan rushed over to ask, young master, oh no, your account now, right? He replied. Though the succession hasn't happened yet, the new year has arrived, so it's acceptable to use the title. Inside, Alon felt frustrated. My grand life plan never aimed to become a count. It was Sai Seidel's great rule, conquer Jiat Emin, avoid inheritance fights, travel around America. Still, he got used to it, and he enjoyed the perks of nobility to the fullest. It's even better than he expected. Evan handed over a letter. This is a letter from Yusha. As he entered the room, Alon asked, by the way, any news on who assassinated Leo? He answered, nothing concrete yet. The Intelligence Council is investigating thoroughly, we'll see. Then they sat at the table and Evan asked, so what's your objective? Not revenge, I hope, he thought. Changes from the game are butterfly effects I caused. Alon said, just to guard against unforeseen situations. Evan suddenly laughed. You looked very count-like just now. Alon sighed at that. Fine, let's say that's true. Alon looked at the letter with curiosity. I wonder what it's about this time. At that moment, the letter read, how are you? We're all well as always. Everyone is absorbed in their own hobbies. Especially, Deuce's puppet show has reached a really high level. On the other side, they're very happy too. Xiaoling is completely into gaming with friends. And the other members. Ryan has been quietly reading lately but keeps inventing things. Raiden has found a knack for landscape design. After reading the letter, Alon smiled gently. The everyday life at the orphanage, used to monthly letters, warmed him more and more. Though he'd never met them, watching the kids grow thanks to his sponsorship made him smile like a real father. So he suddenly asked Evan, by the way, the 5 know how old are those kids now? Evan, curious, asked back, why do you ask? Then he answered, it's almost time for them to enter society, and some left the orphanage earlier. Most of the people you personally ordered to be found are around that age. Hearing that, the pristine image he had of them in Alon's mind seemed a bit shattered. He couldn't help recalling the kids thanking him. Thank you for raising us, from the 5 of us. Alon immediately thought, right, that's how it is. We should gradually let them out into the world. Evan asked again, really, didn't you deliberately gather these weak kids? Alon replied calmly. There's no ulterior motive. They're grown now. We have to think about their future. But privately, he thought differently. If they've been cared for so they won't awaken to crime, then they'll be able to fend for themselves, right? Evan, hearing that, exclaimed, seems like they're all doing well now. I see. Alon began to think. In each boss fight, the narration briefly revealed their abilities. Yusha has talents in faith. Next is that gloomy kid, Deus, who has talent in swordsmanship. Then Rhine, who has talent in research. Then the Beastkin girl, Xiaoling, with combat talent. And finally Raiden, who has the apostle ability. Alon suddenly picked up a box. If he placed them in the right positions, wouldn't they be capable of holding key roles? He thought about those kids and guessed inwardly. Since it's already done, giving each of them a gift would probably please them. After all, I did promise to give them something. After a while, time shifted to the late afternoon, the sunset casting its glow over the mansion. Alon sat at his desk, stretched and exhaled. All done. Evan still had drool at the corner of his mouth as he ran off saying, I'm going then. Alon watched him go, thinking to himself, if things go smoothly, will I get even a small share of the benefits? At that moment, small birds flew peacefully in the sky. Children, take this letter and step out into the wider world. Cut to the children Alon mentioned. His instructions sounded like an order. Yusha kept a cold expression but blushed when she read the letter. This time, the directives were sent individually. All 5 of them were holding their own letters. Deus remained expressionless, calmly reading his letter. Xiaoling jumped up and down excitedly when she got hers. Rhine smiled softly, while Raiden said nothing, and Yusha lowered her eyes, staring at the letter with unreadable emotion. In the room, everyone gathered, focused on the paper in their hands. The orders had arrived. However, this time he sent them individually to each of us. Xiaoling suddenly grabbed her letter, leapt up in joy, and shouted. Raiden and Rhine held their letters, but remained silently pensive. Yusha held several letters and said calmly, but before doing anything, we should reread the previous letters. His orders require a very high level. Xiaoling, excited, said, we can actually read them. Before, only you could read them. Yusha remained composed. The fact he delivered individual orders means he decided it's time for everyone to know. Yusha opened the letter and began to read. How have you been lately? Seems like you have many talented friends, huh? Let me know if you need anything. Xiaoling scratched her cheek, puzzled. Is this an order? Rhine also found it odd after reading, a bit more like small talk. Yusha scoffed when she heard them. Exactly. He disguised orders as casual conversation from the start. All right, look. She analyzed the letter for the group. This is the first order after the greeting letter. It reads, Yusha, how are you? I'm fine. Today my older brother used me as a chair, funny, right? Sometimes I want to send you letters. Reply if you're okay. And the child I sent this time. Yusha analyzed. He designated targets to be eliminated as part of the mission and told us to report back afterward. The letter continued. Thank you for replying. I hope you can tell me what happens at the orphanage each month. I leave that place in your care. You all will be fine together. Yusha continued to explain. This is when he entrusted Lam and Gayat to me. As you can see, he personally selected each of you. Everyone around immediately gaped in shock. Deus, hearing Yusha, seemed to understand. I get it. It's to prevent information leaks, right? I remember my first order. She chuckled and added, like this, you must fully understand the orders and carry out the mission. Deus suggested. Then shouldn't we meet him in person or use a magical communication device instead? Raiden also agreed. He's got a point. If the issue is information leaks, why use letters? Yusha's attitude suddenly shifted. Her expression darkened and her eyes flashed with a cold red light. I hope you haven't forgotten that all we need to do is obey the orders. Deus fell silent at Yusha's unwavering loyalty, feeling a steady trust that sent a chill through him. I won't forget. Suddenly, Xiaoling raised the paper high and shouted excitedly. Then let's read the orders together. In the lit room, everyone turned into a circle and read the orders sent to each of them individually. Deus read his assignment. He told me to go to Caliburn, the Kingdom of Knights. Xiaoling sighed in disappointment. The colony continent? But I don't like the desert. Raiden continued. And I'm to go to Raxus, the entertainment city. Rhine was assigned elsewhere. He told me to go to Larthania, the maze city. Yusha's eyes grew dreamy as she clutched her order passionately. The holy nation, Rosario. Everything everyone needs to do is written in the letter, right? Deus held the order in his hand, voice flat. I don't know why, but he told me to become a knight. Xiaoling brightened. He also said not to worry, sponsorship will continue. Rhine smiled and added. He also told us the locations of the gifts. Raiden seemed amused. Whatever they are, we'll find out when we get there. Yusha warned, but remember, unless he says it first, you must never mention the name Lam and Gayat. Her gaze turned cold and sharp. The group quickly followed the orders, donning black cloaks, and left the mansion. 3 months later, in a room piled high with books, Alon was reading. As expected, there was nothing about changes to magic or spells. I'll have to test it myself. He turned to Evan and asked, any progress gathering information on who killed Leo? Evan replied, the Intelligence Guild says they still haven't found anything. Alon, a bit disappointed, said, is that so? He rested his hand on his chin and thought, it seems the butterfly effect has already slipped beyond my control. This is the result of saving the 5 deadly sins' lives. Alon remembered the cold Duchess Loria. In fact, Loria, who should have died in the original plot, had become Duchess Altia, rapidly expanding her power and influence in the underworld. The more he thought, the darker Alon's expression became. He put the book down and ordered Evan, stop investigating the assassin. Evan was stunned. What, really? Alon thought to himself, clearly ignorance is bliss here. In the setup, almost nothing can escape the Intelligence Guild's network. But if we keep digging into things we shouldn't know. The more he thought, the more frightened he became, his face pale. If excessive caution leads to death, then all defenses are pointless. To protect himself, Alon had no other choice. After all, secret organizations like that won't harm you as long as you don't interfere. There's no reason for them to attack unless you approach them first. Alon told Evan that continuing was pointless. Though he didn't fully understand Alon's purpose, Evan agreed. All right, I'll tell them to stop the investigation. Suddenly, Evan remembered another piece of news and hurried to tell Alon. Oh right, one more thing. It seems Deus was recently knighted in Caliburn. Hearing that, Alon, expressionless though he was, politely offered congratulations. Really. Good for him. 3 months later, Evan came running to Alon with a pile of food. Count, how do you like my versatility? Then whispered to praise himself. Pretty talented, huh? He then added one more bit of news for Alon. Not has even formed a whole team of knights now. Alon was stunned. What? So he's at least reached expert level or higher by now. Alon recalled the knight ranks in this world. Swordmaster, sword expert, swordsman. The more he thought, the more amazed he was. It's not been that long since he was first knighted, has it? Evan chimed in. People are saying the world will see the 5th great knight in under 10 years. Alon suddenly remembered and mentioned the great knights. You mean the ones called the Swords of Caliburn? Evan confirmed. Yes, he's really talented. Alon felt a bit proud. I'm pretty proud of him. Evan chewed and said, Caliburn must be buzzing about this. 6 months later, in a grand castle, Alon was engrossed in work. It had been a year since the 5 deadly sins left the orphanage. Just as he was getting used to the duties of the Count, Evan came in with news. My Lord Count, I just heard something very new. Alon kept working with the paper in his hands. Evan continued. It seems Deus has become a sword of Caliburn. The next bit of news stunned Alon so much he dropped his pen. He's become the 5th great knight. Alon found it hard to believe and asked, but only a swordmaster can become a great knight, right? He recalled what he knew about becoming a knight here. Seiki Delir's swordmaster was a superhuman who surpassed even blade force, and unlocked a unique ability called enactment. Alon asked Evan again, so you're saying Deus is already a swordmaster? He corrected. More precisely, he's about to become one of them, but he hasn't produced his own enactment yet. Evan recounted Deus's rise to knighthood. But in any case, the nation has already granted him the title of Great Knight. Not only because he won the duel against the 4th sword, but also because Caliburn lost a great knight to the northern barbarians. Hearing that, Alon suddenly remembered. Right, they've been at war for over a decade. Evan was incredulous too. It takes 15 years to sense and control mana, and the enactment process needs at least a few decades. He recalled the Empire's history. The first sword, Reinhardt, was 32 when he became the youngest great knight in history. The history of the heroic knight recited in program III was accepted as a temporary teammate and would be removed after the chapter ends. Reinhardt had held a sword since he was 5. Believe a little that he became the youngest swordmaster in history. Alon thought, yes, Reinhardt was unbelievably strong, and even with his talent it took over 20 years. So how did a kid with no sword knowledge become a great knight? Then he had a thought. Wait, if he's just waiting for his enactment, doesn't that mean he'll soon surpass the hesitation and become a swordmaster? The idea pleased Alon, and he couldn't help blurting out, maybe I can ride his coattails sooner than expected. Evan nodded in agreement. Alon looked at the messy pile of books on the table and fell into thought, or maybe not, probably impossible. Evan hurriedly waved his hand. No, he wouldn't do that. Alon revealed a truth, pulling the single letter wedged in a book out. I mean, the only letters I get are from Yusha. He read Yusha's letter aloud. Even after arriving in the Holy Nation, she kept sending regular letters containing news about the deadly sins she grew up with. It seemed they were still in contact. Alon felt a twinge of loss. Although they'd never seen him, they should at least thank him for the gift. He felt a little guilty. He slapped his face hard to sober up. Evan looked horrified at the gesture. Alon told himself, back to the main issue, I'm already deeply grateful that they didn't destroy the kingdom after awakening as the 5 deadly sins. The two stood shoulder to shoulder at the sunlit window. Alon said reluctantly, as long as they're living well, I'm happy. Dusk over the capital Caliburn, the central district, the mansion of a high-ranking noble, home to the famed Eclipse cavalry. Inside, countless swordsmen were training. Deus donned his armor, standing proudly atop, surveying the situation. He was introduced as Deus Macalan, captain of the Eclipse cavalry, the youngest great knight. From above, Deus looked down at the knights below with a cold gaze. Suddenly, a girl below spotted him. The little purple-haired girl waved and called, Big brother. He smiled and waved back, but Deus's expression sank and he sadly thought, it's been exactly a year. Thinking back, he still felt ashamed for having lost everything to those darkness cultists. The horrific images kept replaying in his mind. The painful memories of his childhood surged back, leaving only uncontrollable rage. He pictured his sister swallowed by darkness, drifting away from his arms. Darkness held him back, widening the gap between him and his sister, and hatred welled up inside him. The years of miserable wandering from his childhood returned. Though submerged in torment, he still clutched his sister's hairpin in his hand. Deus's true thoughts began to surface. The fact that dying Gaiet saved my life isn't reason enough for me to swear loyalty to her. But because she promised I could take revenge with my own hands, I obeyed orders under the name Lamb and Gaiet. From that moment, he started selling his life for Lamb and Gaiet. Working as part of Lamb and Gaiet meant enduring many dangerous missions and training. Though death was always close, driven by vengeance, Deus no longer cared for his own safety. Memories rushed like a flood. Over the years, he carried out missions that became the foundation for fighting the darkness. Very soon after, he received a personal secret order for the first time. Deus was astonished to receive a private covert order. This is unbelievable. What is this? In the letter, Alon revealed a small inn south of Caliburn. I've left a gift there, go check it out. But Deus wasn't overly interested. The gift didn't excite him much. Still, he went to the location Alon mentioned. Deus was a bit curious. Maybe there's something here. When he opened the door, the scene inside left him stunned. In that unexpected letter, he saw the figure of a familiar sister. In that unexpected letter, he saw the figure of a familiar sister. The gift from dying Gaiet was the family I thought I'd lost forever. Deus embraced the little girl and collapsed to the ground with joy and emotion. She hugged him back, tears streaming. More precious than life itself, Deus sobbed helplessly without sound. The two reunited, holding each other in happiness. Deus still couldn't believe his eyes. My sister, the one I thought was dead, is alive. Only when emotions eased did they gently separate. He asked hoarsely, Silly, what happened after I lost you? She didn't answer at once. Instead, Silly squeezed Deus's hand to reassure him. With his other hand, he gently wiped the remaining tears from his sister's eyes. They then went back inside and sat at the table to continue talking. Silly gripped the cup in her hands and slowly began to tell. After those people took me away in the darkness, I had to wait my turn for a very long time. I was imprisoned in a dark dungeon level. There were many other levels where captives huddled in silent despair. After who knows how long, Silly recalled. And when it was my turn to be killed, I was the last one left standing. The walls and the floor were stained with bodies and blood. Silly let out a desperate scream. The cloak was torn off. A beam of light shone down. Someone had grabbed her hand. I managed to escape with that light and survive. And years later, when I was nearly sold to a slaver, despair closed in again. Especially when a huge hand gripped me. Just then, blades of light kept sweeping across. A figure appeared, swinging a sword and slicing that hand to pieces. He quickly stepped between Silly and the threat. She remembered a mercenary named Evan had saved her. Silly moved to open a cupboard. After that, she received precious medicine from her benefactor. She picked up a letter bearing a note from Alon Palacio. I will keep sending medicine and support. You'll be safe under the Palacio name. Don't worry about your brother either. Silly was deeply moved. She was immensely grateful for what he had done for her. When Deus learned this, he was astonished. He used his name to protect her. How could dying Gaiet have known about this? He quietly hugged his arm, full of doubt. I never told anyone about my family, and Yusha only knew the black sheep had taken her. So how? Deus suddenly remembered what Yusha once said. She knows everything. In his head, the pieces seemed to click together. All his questions assembled like a jigsaw and vanished. All his questions assembled like a jigsaw and vanished. Back then he couldn't understand Yusha's worry. She'd said something odd. A sword can't think for itself, right? Only now did Deus realize, yet the fool was himself. Good things will come, that's what Alon once said. Deus brooded. Looking back, what he said then, he already knew everything. And he'd hinted that the child would have to survive on their own. He couldn't help but feel a chill as he stared blankly. Silly tilted her head in confusion. Big brother. He snapped back to himself and gently stroked her head, but his mind kept wandering. His sword had dared to act on its own, yet he had chosen to be magnanimous and merciful. And all this time Deus had thought he was being controlled by him, while he himself had only nursed bitterness and plans for revenge against the Black Sheep. He sat at the table, and a servant brought over a tray of hot food. Seeing the radiant smile on his sister's face, Deus suddenly realized the survival of his family was a priceless gift. Yusha's cold voice returned in his memory. You'll realize it soon enough. Why did I follow that man? He understood. She wasn't merely a fanatic, nor did she trust him blindly. And that letter had urged Deus to come to Caliburn and become a knight. He vowed silently to repay her. His mission was to become a leader in Caliburn, a great knight, and form his own order of knights gathering the finest swordsmen. That belief was like sunlight piercing a dark world, breaking him out of the reverie. At that moment, Deus's subordinate stepped forward to report, "Captain, it's time." He moved up onto the high platform. Below, the order's knights stood at attention in perfectly aligned rows. Under the moonlight, each face looked sharp, their gazes resolute. Deus told himself this expedition would be the first stepping stone for the eclipse, and he would not care what hardships came. He brushed the surface of the purple-sheathed blade in his hand, the moonlight glittering on the metal. Then in that dim light, Deus coldly drew his sword, exuding pride. I'll wait for the day I can offer my gratitude along with worthy repayment to please him. I must prove it under the moonlight. On a day when snow filled the sky, the Eclipse Regiment set out on an expedition against the Beast tribes. Meanwhile, at Viscount's Manor, Alon leaned against the wall and sighed. Peace at last, maybe because my kids have all grown up. A gust of wind suddenly swept by, flipping pages and sending his notes flying. He hurriedly grabbed them. They were all blowing away. Alon went back to the work he had paused. Now then, let's see. After returning from the maze, I focused on studying the keywords I wrote. He paused mid-pen, wondering, why did I write in cursive? From now on I'll write neatly. Alon nodded. Good, my reports are complete. On the page he analyzed the keywords, each with different transformations. Alon circled the word contraction, nodding it reinforces flaws in magic. Specifically, contraction strengthens defects within an already completed incantation, causing its range to expand. Additionally, contraction can break forms and alter the projected object. Conversion, state change. This is demonstrated in practice. It will repel, it will break the form affecting the object's transformation. Regarding blue light, he noted reinforcing parallel magic like electrical magic. When cast, it will spiral into a large sphere, emitting electrical light beams. Furthermore, the diffraction path has two main effects, penetration and critical strikes. Specifically, the diffraction path grants piercing ability, which equates to a critical effect that increases the chance to kill an enemy. And importantly, in the keyword rules, if broken, the magic will fail. There are also some notes. Don't use inappropriate keywords, don't repeat the same word, use at most 4 words. Alon scratched his head with the pen. With my mana core, I can only cast 1 spell per day, so it took a long time to discover all these things. He recalled his earlier days of research. In this world's setup, Babylonia's hand signs and keywords had long been forgotten, so there was no information on them. No records existed about where they were written. Alon had read many books but found nothing. In the end, he had to study on his own, and found it somewhat interesting even though he only learned defensive magic. He stood and stepped into the open garden, raised his hand, and fired bolts of lightning. All right, time to see the results of 2 months of trials. With one hand, Alon lifted the index finger of his other hand. From that finger condensed more lightning, spreading into the air, gradually coiling and condensing at a point in the sky. He focused intensely, removed the focal point of this mana sphere, and caused an imbalance to trigger the lightning. This weak and useless magic was stubborn opposition. Soon a sphere appeared in the air. It kept spiraling in the sky. Alon silently chanted to compress it. The sphere shrank from large to small, but its power remained strong. He continued applying his research by invoking the breaking keywords. It began to nurture a specific purpose. Blooming in March. The lightning from Alon's hand gradually turned blue. They grew fierce. From a sphere it expanded like a massive trunk. The lightning spread out like branches. Looking at the result before him, he couldn't help but admire. So order matters after all, Alon muttered, because when I used break first it failed. Before he could finish, a shout cut through his thoughts. No, impossible. He startled and spun around. At that moment 2 people stood there, though he hadn't noticed when they arrived. Kalia looked pale and suspicious. Primordial magic. Alon looked at her in surprise. What? Why is Kalia here? The person beside her trembled. Using primordial magic meant he had reached the rank of a 7th circle mage. He twitched at the corner of his mouth. Primordial was it. In the drawing room of Viscount Palacio's manor, Kalia and Viankel sat in silence waiting for Alon. Kalia couldn't help but feel tense. Her mind was restless. She had 2 clear reasons for coming here. First, to confirm Viscount Palacio's intentions. The one holding the trump card could inflict severe damage on Zenonia. After all, Kalia now was the de facto ruler of Zenonia. Her father was just a puppet she pulled the strings of. So determining Alon's motives was her top concern. Second, to probe the level of the organization protecting him. The group that helped him manipulate Palacio. Though this reason wasn't crucial, Kalia was genuinely curious which mysterious organization enabled Alon's success. Instead, she learned something else. She never expected to see this arrogant mage trembling with fear. Right now, Viankel, sitting beside her, was shaking so badly he couldn't sit still. Viankel, a 5th circle mage expelled from the tower. Because of his inhumane experiments, he could easily wipe out a whole legion. Despite his arrogance toward her, and despite her being his longtime patron, a man both brilliant and cold-blooded enough to carry out such cruelty, now trembled, his face ashen and drenched in sweat. Kalia stared at him in disbelief. Sensing his fear, she had never seen him like this. As she wondered whether that had truly been primordial magic, the door opened, and a low voice cut through her thoughts. With just a single word of command, Alon slowly entered the room. He stepped before Kalia and Viankel and coldly asked, "What brings you to these lands?" Kalia sat upright and, cautious and polite, said, "Sorry for the sudden visit. I very much wanted to meet you." Before she finished, Alon cut in politely, "I won't hold it against you." The young lady of Zenonia spoke, and he folded his hands, looking at her seriously, his voice cool but firm. "However, let me make one thing clear. What I just used was not primordial magic. If you really want to classify my magical ability, I'm only at the 2nd circle level." He spoke plainly without concealment. After a beat, he looked to Viankel and confidently said, "The mage beside you must have realized that magic has no real effect." Inwardly, he regretted, thinking, unfortunate that magic can't be used for offense or defense. Hearing his words, Kalia and Viankel shared the same thought. "He meant he seemed to sense something from you." Viankel gravely used telepathic speech to remind them, "Keep quiet about what you just saw." At that, Kalia tensed. Viankel stammered an earnest apology to him. "You are right, it seems I was mistaken." Kalia looked at him, puzzled and wary. Viankel was being unusually polite. Alon gave a slight nod to let it pass. Hearing him, he relaxed inwardly and felt relieved. He wouldn't make things difficult for them and bluntly said, "Fine, now that the misunderstanding is cleared, let's get to the main matter." Kalia hesitated before carefully saying, "I thought I'd visit you after my work." Alon coolly asked again, "You really don't have any particular reason?" Kalia, flustered, replied, "No." Alon wearily lowered his eyes, implying, "Unfortunate. I have business and can't stay long here." "Be wise." Kalia quickly stood, took a polite deep breath and said, "I understand. Thank you for your time. We'll be leaving now." Alon leaned back in his chair, his voice half joking, half serious, offering, "If you need someone to talk to, I'd advise you to see Duchess Altia. I think you two would get along," he said, gazing directly at Kalia. Kalia's expression darkened. She understood he wasn't speaking casually. After a few seconds of silence, she bowed. "Yes, I promise. If you say so, I will pay her a visit." Both Alon and Evan walked to the door to see the guests off. They watched the luxurious carriage depart. Evan curiously asked Alon why a member of Zenonia, a declining Western house, would come here. Alon answered honestly, "I don't know. I can't even imagine the reason, but deep down I know this will be troublesome. If a false rumor that I used primordial magic spreads, those eager to challenge the strong will start seeking me out. This world is dark fantasy. Just thinking about it, I pictured wicked powers gathering against me." Back inside, Alon worried as he walked, hoping she understood his hint. Zenonia would never visit Altia, who competes in the underworld. He silently prayed, just that they wouldn't come after me. The sky was clear as the carriage headed home. Kalia's voice drifted faintly outside. What the Viscount Palacio used. Was it truly primordial magic? She asked as she sat waiting seriously for Viankel's answer. Viankel's complexion had not recovered. He hesitated and said, "No, it wasn't." Hearing that, Kalia pressed on, then what was his display? Asked that, Viankel trembled. He explained gravely, primordial magic is a kind of sorcery that draws its own immutable laws. On the veil of absolute unchanging principles, it's reserved for mages who have reached the pinnacle. However, what the Viscount used was different. As you asked, I used the observing eye to examine his magic. While Alon and Kalia were talking, he surreptitiously carried out his task. He truly saw a split veil radiating a dark aura wrapping around him. He was tearing that veil apart. He was distorting the absolute unchanging principles. He tried to fix his judgment, but the more Viankel spoke, the more unhinged he became, shouting that the observing eye had shown him things unseen. Viankel cried out that it tore them apart and collapsed the laws themselves. But even after all that, the magic still manifested. He had achieved an impossible miracle. Hearing this, Kalia's face went pale. She widened her eyes in fear at Viankel. Not stopping there, Viankel's voice grew hoarse as he continued. But what happened afterward was truly. The cracking ice and a brooding blood-red eye were actually hidden deep within Alon. It was unmistakably that of a great forgotten god. Thinking this, Viankel grimaced and slumped, his arms trembling as he clutched his head, murmuring to himself to stop thinking further, that thinking more would be dangerous. Suddenly remembering something, he raised his head and warned Kalia seriously. When I was young, I delved so deeply into ancient knowledge that I was praised for my research on the magic of the Forgotten Era. Let me make this clear. Do not oppose the Viscount's will. Kalia frowned and retorted bitterly. So you're saying a commoner like me trying to probe his intentions is pointless. Viankel knew that Loria or Kalia were merely pawns toyed with by Alon, but he couldn't say it outright, only tersely advising via telepathy. I recommend you see Duchess Altia. Although he didn't state it outright, Kalia seemed to vaguely realize she had become his pawn. 5 months later, about 2 years since the children left the orphanage at Viscount Palacio's manor. As soon as Evan opened the door to his study, Alon called out, "Hey, Evan." When Evan stepped up to him, Alon was handling paperwork with one hand and asked about the situation. "Any new news? If it's about the kids, all the better." Evan hesitated and replied, "Not about the kids." Then he mentioned it. It seems the Zenonia domain and the Altia Duchy have allied. Hearing that, Alon felt struck by lightning. He froze and asked Evan, "What?" "The two top underworld powers have allied." Evan nodded. "Camdone confirmed it because it's an underworld pact outsiders can't know, but I'm certain of this." Alon was thrown into chaos, inwardly cursing that he'd sent the culprit down another path. Now he faced an alliance between two masterminds. Is the Asterial kingdom about to fall? Thinking it over, he wondered, wait, did she really take my words seriously back then? He recalled their last meeting. He had suggested to Kalia that if she needed someone to talk to, she should see Duchess Altia. He regretted it at once. Shaking off the wild thoughts, Alon reassured himself. No, it's probably just a temporary alliance. With Kalia's cold, proud nature, she would never. Still, Alon kept reconsidering, but at least he should prepare a little. With that in mind, he took a sheet of paper and seriously wrote a letter to Kalia. To Kalia, sorry if I come across as too blunt and cold. It's because I'm not good at small talk, and I hope this doesn't sound like an excuse. Sunlight poured through the window. Having finished the letter, he handed it to Evan and waved it off. This is for you, Evan. Before leaving the room, Evan promised, I'll deliver this to the domain lady through the mercenary guild, and I'll keep an eye on the kids. Only Alon remained in the room. He looked at the letters in his hand, wondering about Raiden and Xiaolang. He hadn't heard from them since Yusha's letter saying they'd arrived. Thinking of mischievous Xiaolang, he couldn't help worrying and praying she wouldn't starve on the road. Remembering the letter he sent Xiaolang, he believed that if she found the gift described there, she'd become the pinnacle of warriors. As far as he knew, the magic hand was the essence of the Golden Mane tribe. When equipped, it increases critical hit chance by 20%. If the proud culprit had obtained this item, she wouldn't have fallen and become a criminal. Instead, she would have become a mighty wolf beastman. That's what the item description said. Alon's gaze wandered to the sky as he anxiously wondered if he'd given the girl the location of the secret treasure he intended as an emergency fund. I mean, she's skilled enough to earn her own way, so she'll be fine, right? That place is the nation of warriors, a land where strength can grant you the world, the desert nation, wild and full of dust. Under a night sky glittering with stars, deep within a rocky cave, Xiaoling skipped along the rough dirt path heading out. Outside, she stretched and cried out with joy. Finally, the trial is over. Looking at the magic hand treasure on her wrist, Xiaoling couldn't stop smiling in gratitude. Oh, great moon, thank you for this gift. She waved her arms and mumbled happily, thinking the Golden Mane tribe's essence was just a legend. It turned out what her mother told her as a child wasn't just a fairy tale. Thinking of that, her undefeated, sharp eyes stared into the distance. Old memories surfaced. As a child, she and her siblings gathered around their mother. She had innocently asked the essence of the Golden Mane tribe. Her mother gently stroked her small head and in a soft voice said, "Yes, our wolf tribe are descendants of the king of all beast folk, the Golden Mane tribe. The essence of the Golden Mane tribe is a legendary treasure passed down for centuries. It grants us strength and authority. Obtaining it is no easy challenge. Only those truly capable may possess this precious relic. And today, the truth that she had won the essence. Xialing had to travel a rough, long road to reach this relic. It was placed on a sheer, rocky ledge. When she slipped it onto her wrist, a violent, near-death pain shredded her body as she endured and overcame all the inner world trials. Enduring those two horrors proved beyond doubt that Xialing now held the relic in her hands. Old memories crowded Xialing's mind. She sincerely thanked the Great Moon, her benefactor who saved her from death during biological experiments. At the lowest point in her life, with scars on her skin and a soul ready to give up, the Great Moon was the light that redeemed Xialing's life. He granted her the power to avenge Black Dragon, the one who killed her parents. So Xialing vowed with all her might that she would repay his favor. Seemingly sensing her resolute will, the essence relic in her hand flared with a powerful surge. Xialing confidently tested the relic, telling herself firmly that he wouldn't want her to become a mediocre fighter. From this moment on, Xialing paused slightly, a strange light flashing in her eyes as magical currents flowed into her body. She silently pledged to become the strongest warrior, to revive the Golden Mane tribe by gathering the remaining members, and to kill Black Dragon with this. Saying that, Xialing raised the essence relic on her wrist to the sky. This relic would be the proof of her oath of honor. The memory closed, and Xialing stood motionless in the desert late at night, gazing at the bright moon tonight, thinking of the Great Moon. Her voice drifted softly on the cool breeze. All for him, let's begin. Saying that, Xialing laughed out loud and skipped forward. Now, in the silent night of the lonely colony, only Xialing's steady footsteps moved forward. The image seemed to herald the future revival of the Golden Mane tribe's great wolf kings under the blue moon after 500 years. Alon was intently reading the document when Evan suddenly spoke up. "Oh right," he said, wiping his sword and feeling guilty. "The Intelligence Guild has information on the kids. I meant to tell you at the training ground but forgot." Alon, not angry and staying calm, asked, "All right, what's up?" Evan replied that Xialing was doing very well at the settlement. She even had the nickname Golden Lightning. Alon frowned slightly. Golden Lightning sounded familiar. Anyway, hearing she's okay made him happy. He nodded. Indeed, in that land, strength lets you do anything. He asked further, "What about Raiden? I haven't heard from him since he said he was apprenticing in Raxus." Evan said there was some information on him, but they were still verifying accuracy. Alon fell into thought. "Is that so? Oh, and hey, Evan." He shot a suspicious look. "Aren't you very busy?" Evan looked flustered and sweating, stammering. "Why are you looking at me like that all of a sudden? I've done everything you told me." Alon instructed, "You need to get ready. It takes at least a month to reach the magic tower." Evan jumped up, startled. "What? The magic tower? You never mentioned it to me." Alon rubbed his chin in surprise. "Didn't I say?" Evan sighed. "Well, I'm used to it." He couldn't help but be puzzled. "But a month to the 6 magic towers is only about a week," he said. "We'll go to the Azure Academy of Magic." Hearing that, Evan nodded. "I see, it's near Maze City, so it's quite far." Finally, he stood and left the room. "I'll start preparing immediately." Alon silently agreed with a nod. After Evan left, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. Another month on a carriage, just thinking about it made him tired. But what could he do? The item that could support his precious small mana core was there. Thinking that, Alon turned and propped his chin on his hand. Maze City? That brings back memories. When I played games, I spent ages grinding levels there. He closed his eyes and recalled. The maze sits at the city's center. It's a special leveling map. Players can get higher quality items by leveling up and pushing deeper inside. Yet despite countless players visiting the maze, none have ever reached the final point. Back then, Alon had to use a cheat just to reach floor 150. He couldn't help swearing. The developers must be insane. There's more below. Why add floors when no one can reach them? Just to watch us suffer. Is there any decent loot on floor 150? However, like in the game, achievements and relics kept being discovered there. So the job of a magic appraiser officially became so popular it guaranteed a wealthy life. Suddenly, Alon remembered Rhine. She said she'd soon take the appraiser exam. With her talent, she should pass easily. Suddenly, Alon thought of Rhine again. She said she'd be taking the appraiser exam soon. Back in the present, he felt guilty. Maybe the gift I gave Rhine was too little compared to others. It only helps appraise equipment. If that's not enough, I should send her separate support. A starry evening in Maze City, Larthania, a place not under anyone's rule. This is a city of explorers and mercenaries. In a narrow alley, passing countless shops in a corner of the southern district, one can find a secret appraisal shop called Mare, a quietly famous shop known for its unique services. It mainly serves nobles and rank adventurers. Among them was the Lord of Larthania. Rhine announced that the appraisal was complete. My lord, he said, surprised. She held up the item and explained that the device uses mana to create fire. The lord gratefully thanked her as always. Let me see. When he picked up the device, Ryan guided him. This is an artifact that can be engraved. The lord asked curiously, what does can be engraved mean? She answered calmly, with just a bit of mana it can sustain the flame for at least an hour. He couldn't help laughing in amazement. Its efficiency has increased significantly. Very good. Everything settled. The lord departed. Before stepping out, he turned back and said as usual, thanks as always. From behind the counter, a gentle voice replied, you're welcome. Once the shop was empty of customers, she removed her mask. Under the dim light, Ryan's beautiful face appeared, her emerald eyes clear but a little weary. She then turned toward another item on the shelf that looked like a small tube. Ryan picked it up and murmured, this item can also be engraved. Now I can see why this tucked-away shop is famous, engraving work. Ryan took the item and opened the door to a room, stepping inside. This was a gift from the great moon. Moonlight streamed through the window, fully illuminating an object floating and glowing. Looking at it, she smiled softly. When he first told me to become an appraiser, I couldn't understand why. Ryan remembered Alon. His true identity was a friend of Palin from the era of the forgotten outer gods. I understood that everything up to now was meant to destroy the dark beasts, but at that time, she had read the letter telling her to go to May's city, Larthania, and become a magic appraiser. Back then, she couldn't link that order to the goal. However, Ryan obeyed and went alone to May's city. Although full of doubts, how would becoming an appraiser relate to killing dark beasts? But what happened next changed her thinking. The moment I saw his gift, I recognized it. The stalker's eye. It quickly identifies items below a certain mana threshold to assist appraisal. The moment her hand touched the eye, she suddenly recognized it. It was a bit different from what she knew. Its nature didn't even exist in the library. Then the seals surrounding the eye gradually disappeared. The chains wound around it snapped open. It flared, and the single eye opened. After the seal was broken, the engravings unlocked. A row of numbers above 500 appeared on top of the eye. Zin thought to himself, to gain the power to fight dark beasts, I must awaken this item. It's an ability and also a means to offer sacrifices. Now the number on the stalker's eye had changed. It displayed 248,500. She pointed the tube toward it, and a beam of golden light shot out immediately. In no time, a sacred sigil appeared on the body of the tube. Ryan smiled wryly. She still had to offer 252 more items before it would fully awaken. To raise the relic's stats, it would absorb something from offerings, essentially altering this eye. Once, while she was powering up an item the eye didn't like, the previously accumulated offering points were wiped out. Since then, Ryan was certain it only reacted to specific high-tier relics, and if you offered the wrong item, the accumulated points would vanish. Thinking that, she couldn't help but smile, nuzzled the eye, precisely appraised all relics, and selected high-tier offerings to hide away. This was work only I could do, because I was born alongside the Eternal Library. Ryan cradled it in her hands. It was all to kill the Black Wolf, all according to the will of the Great Moon. 3 weeks later at the Azure Magic Tower, a carriage moved silently along the stone road circling the tower. Inside, the Deputy Tower Master of the Azure Tower, Phinia, frowned in annoyance and spoke. The Tower Master is currently absent. State your business and go. Seeing Alon remain silent, she grew more irritated. I'm busy, so be quick. He looked at Phinia, assessing her silently. She was a familiar face he'd seen in the main storyline. She's still Deputy Tower Master because the main plot hasn't started. In the game, she was a rare prodigy who reached 8 circles at 20 and became this tower's master. Speaking of the Azure Tower, it's a magic tower not only powerful, but also monopolizes production of certain essential goods, placing their status on par with the nobility. He was a bit displeased. Despite the power of a Deputy Tower Master, your human limits should be far surpassed. The attitude was somewhat annoying. Alon still tried to introduce himself. I am Count Ban Leo. As previously stated, I'm here to discuss the Time Rift issue. On the other side, Phinia busied herself. Right, I must transfer this document. But when he spoke, she still asked, so what's the matter? Alon said calmly, I can remove the Time Rift. Phinia's hand holding the document froze. The Time Rift is a tier linking to a mysterious subspace that appears where magic is used frequently. It creates anomalies that cause serious damage, but unpredictable, extremely dangerous monsters no one can foresee. She analyzed him with her eyes, then after a moment sneered. With such mediocre talent, what do you intend to do? Phinia waved him off without hesitation. Whatever, go home. Alon was flustered. Wait, shouldn't it be different? I need an answer. She cut him off irritably. You're going to remove the Time Rift and seize the treasure? Right. Of course you do that. Phinia slammed her hand on the table in anger and yelled. Is that so? Do you know how many people come here about that every day? Alon tried to persuade her. I'm serious. Show me the time rift and I'll prove it to you. He felt wronged. Why didn't she believe him? Unbelievable. Her voice suddenly dropped. Look, I understand you need a major achievement to turn public opinion. Because people are gradually learning the only reason you became a count was luck when your brothers died. However, that doesn't mean you can bring your personal affairs here to cause trouble. Saying that, Phinia unleashed a power that shook the space. Alon was startled and stumbled backward. Evan caught him just in time. He muttered, "Are those rumors really spreading? Probably because I've kept a low profile, though it's true. She looks like a workaholic but knows outside news astonishingly well." Phinia's gaze now seemed to crackle with electric sparks and pure rage. Alon involuntarily shivered. She's terrifying, not joking. She put me in my place when I was a bit annoyed. Evan leaned close and whispered, "That's just her mana. I swear we'd be snapped in half if we challenged her." Alon regained his composure but felt fairly desperate, so he stepped forward to negotiate. "If I can't close the time rift, I'll give all my assets to the magic tower." Phinia still didn't believe him and muttered, "Nonsense." "I see." Alon's eyes were steady. "If you wish, I'll swear an oath. It's not a bad offer for a bit of your time, don't you think so?" She hesitated for a moment at his words, a flicker of indecision crossing her face. After a while, Phinia led him to a door. "The time rift is in here as promised. All your assets will be mine the moment you fail." Alon was confident that won't happen. She leaned her head against the door and watched him, thinking to herself, perfect timing. I wonder if he's the mastermind of the domain or just a lucky, useless guy. After listening to him a bit, I believe he's the latter. Phinia sneered slightly and assessed him. Despite the uncanny air about him, he only has a small mana core and slightly above-average energy sensing. His talent barely touches the second circle. What is he going to do with that? Pathetic. In fact, it truly didn't need closing. In 3 months, it would naturally vanish after spitting out a relic. The research would end there, and no mage capable of closing a time rift would appear. However, the time rift at the Azure Magic Tower had kept wreaking havoc for over 2 years. Now Alon slowly approached the cracking time rift. Phinia shrugged and warned, "If you can't do anything, just leave the room." He ignored her and began to weave hand seals. She frowned in suspicion. "You plan to use your hands as conduits instead of a staff? Even ancient grimoires classify methods. That's a primitive technique, almost something from fairy tales." Phinia couldn't help but disdainfully try to stop him. "For heaven's sake, stop imitating and leave." Alon paid no heed and began chanting. Suddenly, the surroundings went pitch dark. She went pale, cold sweat running down her nose. "I can't move." "No, everything has frozen." Phinia quickly poured mana into her eyes, trying to observe around her. In front of her, a gigantic crimson eye was tightly shut. Then, in an instant, the eye opened, its pupil a deep red that seemed to gouge into Phinia's soul. She focused on those mysterious circles and fell into thought, sensing something unknown. Seeing through its nature was simple. It wasn't supposed to happen. Phinia raised a hand to touch something, then stopped herself, cut off the thoughts. What is understood must never be acknowledged. Cut off your thoughts, truly. The red eye continued to stare unblinking. After a moment, a colossal hand gently reached toward Phinia, prompting a fleeting thought. An absolute command, she glared. Her face was now dotted with sweat from fear. "I understand the command." The eye shrank, then shut completely, leaving Phinia staring up in utter bewilderment. She stood frozen in place, not knowing what to do next. Suddenly Alon spoke, making Phinia jump. The gate had closed. As soon as he finished, he was already holding something and thought to himself, "This is as easy as turning my hand over. All I need is an item and a special method." Then Alon said, "I'll take the relic that Sharon threw up." He looked at Phinia and pondered. "I need to use it a few more times, so I used a convincing charm. Will she believe it?" Phinia's face was pale with panic. She stammered, "Yes, I won't tell anyone." Alon thought glumly, did his lie fail? He stepped toward Phinia. "Ah, I'm very grateful, but it's unnecessary." Phinia took a fearful step back and cried out, "Yes, I'll keep absolute secrecy. I won't tell anyone." Terrified, she kept backing away and shouted, "I can keep a secret. Really, I'm serious." Alon was still confused, wondering why she was acting that way all of a sudden. He turned and called to Evan, "Let's go home." Before they could leave, Alon looked back at the call. "Please wait a moment." Phinia immediately opened a case and presented it to him. "This is a mana recovery potion I made myself. Please take it." Alon picked up a bottle and inspected it. A potion personally made by the deputy tower master, and it's a top-grade one. Phinia asked, "Do you like it?" Alon froze and thought, these 2 bottles are worth as much as several lower-grade ones combined. I checked the price and nearly choked. Then Alon wondered, was she really grateful I closed the rift? Phinia, embarrassed and pale, said that was at the Count's request. "I will absolutely keep silent." "Seriously?" Suddenly she asked mischievously, "Of course." "A sworn oath, Ma. Should I make a sworn oath?" Alon thought helplessly, does something so trivial need an oath? After a moment he said, wait a second, and then thought to himself she seems to be misunderstanding something. Suddenly many chains fell from nowhere onto the spot where they stood, and quickly bound them tightly. Phineas shouted again, "See? I keep my promises very well." Alon sighed and replied, "I understand." Then he thought sadly that she showed no sign of clearing up the misunderstanding. In a flash of thought, at the Azure Tower he had gotten the relic he wanted, 5 potions and an oak. Early the next morning, in front of a magnificent tower, Evan stared at the object Alon wore and asked, "Is that the treasure that fell from the rift? Hard to get, but it looks more primitive than I thought. Is its performance good?" Alon gently touched the object and replied, "Well, anyway, this is something I absolutely need." He stared at it, the seal of disrespect. "Yes, I managed to take it safely. The gem set on the bracelet can absorb and store mana from the air." The item on Alon's wrist suddenly glowed and he exclaimed, "It works well." He fell into thought again. The storage capacity isn't large, but with my mana core it's more than enough. Then Alon stared into the distance. A body with less mana than even a support item. He resolved firmly. No, his goal was to study magic and protect himself, not to fight. Alon sat in a corner nodding. This is enough. He thought of Phineas again and wondered. By the way, what exactly did Phineas misunderstand? Alon suddenly recalled her oddly polite attitude. He thought of Phineas. "Please come in." Alon turned to introduce himself. "Let me be clear. I am a second circle mage." Phineas replied warmly, "I know, you truly seem just like a second circle mage." Alon heard that and panicked. Was she mocking him? Coming back to reality, he sat still and thought. That reaction was like Kalia's last time. He kept recalling images of Kalia. "Over here." Phineas forced a smile, still feeling uneasy. Alon stared out the window pensively. After all, he probably wouldn't see any of them again, so it should be fine. Sunlight poured down, and below a carriage rolled by with voices. "The weather's great," someone called. "Yes, it's peaceful." Outside, the Duchy of Altia was utterly silent. Loria held a teacup and gently said, "It's been a while. I hope you'll have a pleasant time, Miss Zenonia." Kalia smiled and replied, "Of course, nothing's changed about you. I'm truly glad to see you again." Loria cooed, "It's convenient that we don't have to argue over rank or power." Kalia added, "The farsightedness of Count Palacio once again astonishes people." She remembered Alon and thought that visiting Duke Altia seemed like a good idea. Kalia Leon thought after following his advice. She quickly grasped the true intention. That evening during conversation, both realized they were inferior to Palacio. Loria and Kalia's faces gaped in surprise. Whatever the reason, this was an alliance built on Count Palacio's command. Alon's imposing image briefly appeared. Power struggles were meaningless under the absolute number 1. 2 insignias appeared as well. Zenonia and Altia had become more comfortable allies. Loria wondered the conference was next month. Why visit today? Kalia explained. The Count sent a letter citing the day I came to visit. Loria gently opened the letter. What could be inside? The letter discussed talks among noble houses. It read, "Milady, I hope you are well. Regarding your previous visit, some nobles complained to me about it. Therefore, there aren't many nobles suitable for me. Please understand." Kalia said, "It sounds like a normal apology letter." But Loria continued, "There's definitely a plot hidden inside." Kalia agreed at once. "Yes, I think we should discuss it." And so the two talked together. "Not many nobles suitable for me?" Baron Kenia belongs to the noble faction, and Marquis Maranchen is a key royal faction figure. Viscount Bylanda belongs to the royal faction. Duke Faldian is a central noble faction figure among the nobles he spoke with at the ball. Finally, Kalia concluded briefly. He dislikes both the noble and royal factions. Terrifying thought. Does that mean wipe them all out? Loria calmly said, "We should draw conclusions based on common sense." Kalia quickly replied, "I agree." Loria slowly said, then she emphasized, "He wants to eliminate the current nobles." When they realized everything, both went pale with fear. Loria stared and said, "That's the implication." Kalia, also frightened, added, "and establish a new government." Loria scowled up at the sky in displeasure. That's why Altia needs her reputation and to bestow herself the dukedom. The atmosphere grew awkward. If the Western overlord were beside her, Kalia would surely resist. It seemed that way. They told each other, "We should plan." Meanwhile, at the Azure Tower, a voice rang out. "Count Palacio. Do you mean he's like the Stargate?" Phineas lay exhausted on the table. "Yes," the Tower Master asked curiously, "tell me the details." She looked up and sighed. And so the pieces of the picture were formed randomly, moving chaotically and snapping into place. Over here, Evan asked anxiously, "Are you all right?" Alon put a hand to his mouth and answered, "I suddenly choked on a sweet potato." He spoke calmly as if nothing was wrong. Evan brought water and said, "Here, have some water." Alon took it and thanked him. He wore a sad, downcast expression. "I want to go home so badly." Then he thought Yusha's letter should arrive soon. The sky grew dim. Beneath a statue of a goddess, Yusha stood motionless. Then she gave a gentle, shy smile. Cut to the Azure Tower. At that moment, someone's voice rang out. "Oh, Phinia dear, my apprentice, I'm back." He looked around as soon as he returned. Strange, I can no longer sense the presence of the time rift. This was the master of the Azure Tower, Archmage Selim Micardo. Seeing her like that, he wondered, did something happen while I was away? Opposite him, Phinia replied in a soft, deferential voice, "Tower Master, you're finally back. I've completed all the tasks you assigned." Seeing her demeanor, the Tower Master was a bit surprised. "Phinia, what's the matter?" Selim asked gently, but Phinia didn't even bother to answer. That made him wonder inwardly. The girl didn't erupt at me like she usually does. What on earth happened? Since Phinia had risen early to the Deputy Tower Master position, thanks to her innate talent, her ego and arrogance had soared to the heavens. She must have just made some rookie cry again. Still, I never intended to tame that personality. Her passion for magic is so pure. Once she reaches the 7th circle, she'll realize how little those achievements truly mean and will naturally rein herself in. That's why Phinia looks so strange right now. Selim stepped forward to comfort her. "Listen, my northern mission kept me away for a long time. Maybe the backlog while I was gone overwhelmed you." She turned to the Tower Master with a pleading look. After a moment, Selim finally understood. So the Count sealed the time rift, but because of an oath, she couldn't reveal the exact method he used. In response, she shook her head slightly. There really weren't many details to recount about the sealing process. That's all she could report. For some reason, her subdued sadness seemed to amuse Selim. Could the thing that made Phinia humble be some inexplicable magic? Or to be precise, primordial magic? The girl was so frightened she didn't even resist when I touched her. "Count Palatino of the Kingdom Asteria? Very interesting. This is someone I need to watch." Time passed quickly, cutting to the protagonist's location. A month had passed since leaving the Azure Tower. After seizing the relic from the disrespectful one, I began seriously studying the runic sigils because my daily magic usage limit had been increased. Important note, the rules for operating sigils and spells break if these criteria aren't met. Don't use irrational spells, don't repeat the same element, and use no more than 4 types of magic. Combining similar phrases can create resonance. New findings suggest a sigil needs to be arranged scientifically. That's my hypothesis, and I've grasped a new operating principle of polymorphic sigils. This may relate to the technique and placement I use to set up the magic operations, though I'm not yet certain. Evan happened to be passing by and came over to ask, "Every time I see it, your magic seems stronger than before." "My Lord Count, is that so?" Alon sighed in exasperation at this. It hadn't matched the level of a 2nd circle mage before, but now it seemed to be on a whole different scale compared to a few months ago. "I think a routine gravity spell couldn't have made a pit that deep." He then thought to himself that gravity is only a 2nd circle spell. Even pushed to maximum output, it shouldn't be able to crush a being to that extent. I used to think I was gradually getting stronger. Could that have been a mistaken feeling? If there's a real reason for a sudden surge in power, it's surely not due to proficiency or the runes. After all, increasing magical mastery only improves precision and casting practicality. The sigils act like trigger keywords that change a spell's properties. I spent months analyzing the sigil matrix for gravity, and lately had been swapping nearly synonymous phrase clusters for one another. In the end, I realized the power only rose when the optimal arrangement was found. It's not just an illusion. Otherwise, this would be absurd. There's no basis for a spell's destructive force to spike like that. Maybe my condition has just been at its best lately. Meanwhile, Evan, making small talk, pulled out a letter and said, "Oh, I stopped by to deliver a letter from Yusha. It just arrived." Alon nodded. Thank you, Evan. I'll go back to my room and study it when I have free time." "Oh, are you heading into the study now?" "Yes, I've used up all 3 of my spellcast slots for today." The protagonist answered and walked off, thinking, what origin caused my power to suddenly jump? Could it be a benefit from a curse? A curse as an ancient Eastern ritual where the caster accepts self-sacrifice to harm others or themselves. When bearing a curse, the target suffers but also gains compensating strength. But no one here understands Eastern occult arts, so that's unlikely. Or is it the power of faith? But from account of a small country forgotten by the underworld, that sounds absurd. Well, sometimes I should just set aside my worries and carry on with life. After all, nothing terrible comes from that, right? Elsewhere in the Rosario nation-state, in the capital Rional, a pristine city where residents worship Shirnia, goddess of the moon and peace, at the Eastern Chapel. While Yusha was praying there, a knight stepped up from behind and said, "Greetings, sister." Seemingly guessing who had come, Yusha gently turned and replied, "Sir Knight Loke, how have you been?" At that moment, Loke thought to himself that she's a nun ranked even below a holy knight, without the right to wear the sanctity band. Yet I still need to show proper respect. With that in mind, the knight bowed and began his report. Yes, this time we rescued 8 children and 25 civilians from a remote village on the eastern-western border. This success is thanks to you, sister. Yusha shook her head, refusing credit. Not at all, it was you who performed those noble deeds. Lok replied, and it was you who enlightened someone as ignorant as me. I will always be grateful. For 20 years I sank into despair, because I couldn't sense any divine power at all. I nearly gave up everything. As he said this, he recalled his past. While Lok sat panting after training, Yusha's voice rang not far away. If there's something you long for so deeply, try placing your faith in the moon. The moon, he wondered in desperate doubt. Yusha didn't say much, replying only with a cryptic line. You'll understand a lot once you actually do it. Back to the knight's thoughts. At that time I was so desperate I was willing to try anything. I prayed sincerely to the moon for days, just as she instructed. Then I miraculously began to use divine power. I was overjoyed by that. But because of it I gave in to momentary temptation, placing my faith in the moon instead of the goddess Shirenia. I feared I was sliding into heresy. Yet all power borrowed from the divine shares the same nature. Even relics blessed in the goddess's name gleamed human-like when I touched them. That was clear proof of the divine power I possessed. But why did you advise me to trust the moon, sister? In response, Yusha began to enlighten him. Faith stems from an invisible belief and takes a long time to manifest. It's always easier to seek what you need in what is tangibly before you. That moonlight will always watch over you and support you. Whether under some charm or not, Lok agreed as if it were obvious. I understand, because the goddess herself is a symbol of the moon. This is a way for skeptical people to find an absolute anchor for their desires and hopes. He bowed in gratitude. Sister, I sincerely thank you from the bottom of my heart. Back in the present, Yusha spoke up. If you'd like to show your gratitude, let's perform a prayer ritual together. Lok answered, placing a hand on his chest. I'm willing to do that as many times as needed. You arrived at the right time. The ceremony is about to begin and everyone has gathered. Yusha led Lok into the cathedral, which had drawn a great crowd. She slowly walked to the center of the cathedral, while Lok found a place to sit. Now let us pray together. Tonight the moon is clearer than ever. Everyone faced the great moon. Back to the protagonist, Alan held the letter Yusha had sent and sighed in boredom. Today's letter was nothing special, mostly everyday matters. That means everyone is living fine, which is good, indeed. But the fact that no one except Yusha writes to me, even though they're all okay, still makes me a little sad. If I think from their perspective, it's understandable. I'm just a stranger they never met, so I'm probably only a kind passerby to them. Anyway, I achieved my goal of guiding them on the right path so they won't destroy the world, so there's no reason to be sad. No reason, absolutely no reason at all. Alan's heart wavered. Yusha must be very busy, yet she still writes to me regularly. I raised 5 children, but in the end only the eldest acknowledged my efforts. Just as Alan was quietly tearing up inside, his friend Evan suddenly spoke up. Count, are you busy? Evan's unexpected question startled Alan. Hey, you're still here. He didn't need to fetch any paper, adding, oh yes, I just received some news about the kids from the Information Guild and wanted to report to you right away. About Raiden, the one you asked about last time. He's become a pirate now. This news really left the protagonist full of question marks. A few seconds later he stammered, can you be more specific? With that, the two of them moved to a table to sit and have a drink. Evan, the bodyguard, began to relay the information he'd gathered. First, the most talked-about person is Xiaoreng, and Xiaoreng has racked up a 32-win streak out of 100 matches. That's the required condition for her to become Baba Yaga. Hearing that, Alan suddenly blurted out, a 32-win streak? Wait, the fighter with the longest streak is. Before he could finish, Evan nodded. The Lion King with a 41-win streak. At this, Alan couldn't help but be impressed. The Lion King is insanely strong, briefly joining a player's party once. This colony leans heavily on many powerful individuals to showcase its military might, and she's about to surpass the colony's top figure. Unaware of his thoughts, Evan continued his report. As for Deus, his cult executed one of the 8 chieftains of the nomad tribes in the Snowlands, the leader of those who transform into monsters through rituals. You know them, right? For the protagonist, of course, he knows this storyline. He thought to himself, I know them very well. Back in the game, I had to fight the nomad tribe and kill their god, Ultultus. Lucky I don't have to face them now, because Ultultus only appears when the 5 great sins assemble, an insanely hard showdown. Thinking that, Alan relaxed. Well, looks like I don't have to worry about Deus anymore. Evan chimed in cheerfully. With this, he's now considered on par with the top first sword. Knowing the kid I mentor has grown that strong, Alan started plotting to latch on to him. Maybe I should go meet him, might be lucrative. Putting aside Alan's daydreams, Evan added, And Rin, she's become an appraiser, now able to inscribe black patterns onto artifacts to boost their power. Such a thing exists. Interesting, she's probably doing well in her own way. Alon nodded in agreement, but his tone then shifted. So the bottom line is Raiden really did turn pirate. Realizing they'd hit the main point, Evan's expression grew a bit more serious. Have you heard of the 7 Isles off the Arach-Soso coast? It's where the great pirates gather. He became captain of the first isle, the largest island. At this, Alon seemed to collapse in disappointment. No way, a forum post I once laughed off has become my reality. I didn't send him to Arach-Soso for that reason. Raiden is great at spotting enemies, and since he's a rare sea deity, he can move freely underwater. The Arach-Soso Sea also holds many precious relics, so I advised him to become a treasure hunter, a promising profession. I used to specialize in finding enemies too. Seeing Alon so despondent, Evan tried to encourage him. Being captain of a legendary pirate crew is practically equivalent to lord of that island. He's become an extremely important figure now. Probably so. Alon replied, but his despair didn't lessen. He kept wondering how Raiden managed to remove the captain of the First Isles. All the captains are capable fighters, and they've never lost a naval battle to anyone. Maybe he just dug out the truly valuable items from the relics of the old era. I wanted to get a top-tier relic too, so I had to grind countless hours as a treasure hunter. So he armed himself to grab the captain's position. I know the world doesn't always run the way I want, but this is bitter. Is this what it feels like to have a child turn pirate? Just thinking about it drained the color from Alon's face, like he might go sell salt at any moment, which scared Evan half to death. Count, are you okay? Cut to the massive port city of Raxus. Across the shoreline lies the pirate's 7 heavens, and the largest of them is the First Isles. The great pirate, the Red Slayer, was once the captain here. He used wealth to buy the protection of the Celestial King, and this is the one who defeated him to become the new captain of the First Isles. Raiden now wore an expression of extreme displeasure. I just don't know what the Great Moon actually is. I never really cared, so I never thought deeply about it. At first, he was just someone I was grateful to. I should have died like a slave being cut open. But thanks to him, I met Yusha and awakened my power. Honestly, I felt like I was following Yusha's orders while serving as Lamb and Gaiet. So when I received a direct order from the Great Moon, I really couldn't understand it. What does becoming a treasure hunter even mean? It even fills me with disgust. I need to start my revenge as soon as possible. Those black things, they massacred an entire tribe. We were living peacefully on an island no one even knew about. On the continent, we were lucky enough to escape to. Those damned hunters killed my parents when they were exhausted and sold me off like a slave. I don't think becoming a treasure hunter and that gift have anything to do with my vow of vengeance. The day I first set foot here, it looks like at least I have to pretend to follow the orders. Why's it so noisy over there? Raiden paid attention to the nearby ship. Wanted posters had just appeared on the board behind it. He immediately probed with his power. The ones who destroyed everything for Raiden were all here. A scar-faced man sneered and said, "Only the chosen great pirates can win the Celestial King's protection through wealth. The selected captains of the 7 Isles are eternal." At that, Raiden could no longer contain his murderous intent. "I found the bastards who killed my parents, so they finally seized power. The Celestial King is deliberately spreading lies that only through a sacred ritual using parts of the sea god's body can one receive the power granted by the sea god Co. Lie. And every captain of the 7 Isles once held that power. They're celebrating, unaware that disaster is coming. Those damned hunters tore my parents' bodies to pieces." Raiden's fury erupted. On the night of the fireworks, Raiden stood high on the gloomy ship watching the scene. Waves kept crashing, and he gloomily wondered to himself, how could he have known? Raiden mouthed, even though I never told him. He looked at the beautiful ship out there, and thought to himself that it was as if the Great Moon had been keeping its promise, and had even arranged the opportunity for revenge at this perfect moment. Raiden clenched his trembling hands, thinking, but with our strength, we probably can't take them on right now. He recalled those people, for they were the ones who possessed the power of the sea god. At that memory, Raiden suddenly paused, considering if it had all been part of the plan from the start. Raiden raised his pendant and murmured, "Then this gift must have its reason." Raiden held the pendant up high under the moonlight, the ship all around him. The Great Moon had already set everything in motion. He grasped the necklace with both hands reverently. Raiden always knew the board and the foundation for revenge had been laid out. Then the young man, eyes full of sorrow, pressed the pendant to his forehead, resolve burning within him. The next day, the sea was a vivid blue with waves lapping, the small islands lush with trees and tall rows of coconut palms, and the feet of a youth running fast across the islet's grass. Raiden dove straight down from above without hesitation, his whole body falling into the surrounding waters. Amid the waves and clear foam, The young man saw the familiar pendant. Raiden's eyes suddenly lit up at the sight of it. The pendant fit perfectly around the young man's neck. The gift from the Great Moon, that amber lens. Raiden remembered that the amber lens made it easy to find relics lying deeper on the sea floor, and some of those relics would be enough to make up the power he lacked. Raiden swam down, diving deeper toward the treasure on the seabed. That day, as dusk fell over the sea, Raiden had strapped the items he found under the sea to his neck and ankles. Walking, Raiden muttered just a thank you. I'm such a fool. Raiden held Duong Chao B letter 1EA3O aloft toward the sky. The Great Moon had kept its promise. He reflected on what had happened, not only bringing the target of his revenge before him, but also granting him the power to carry it out. Raiden murmured, the mission in that letter is finally all clear. What was his true intention? Raiden slicked back his hair proudly, repeating his words, to carry out revenge and conquer the Seven Isles. Elsewhere, Yusha sat and spoke casually, am I right or not? Then don't forget all of that, O great one of Raiden's place. He continued, because the Great Moon is truly that saying, isn't it? Words that once meant nothing gradually became a light of faith. Raiden whispered to himself, everything is etched deep in my heart for the Great Moon. Raiden stood on the shoreline holding Duong Chao B letter 1EA3. The moon slowly sank below the horizon. 3 months later, the oppressive heat had begun to fade, and autumn arrived with the Asteria festival held every 2 years. Alon Palacio sat in the carriage, thinking to himself that he was dragged along against his will. He asked his companions, must we be forced to join every 4 years? It's really annoying. Carriages followed one after another, speeding forward. Even sitting across from him, answered Alon Palacio, according to the schedule, the Crowd and Edorn family carriages have already mustered. Alon nodded, oh, is that so? Alon Palacio thought to himself that grouping into large convoys to avoid bandits was such a hassle. What a weird custom. It's infuriating. Time passed quickly, and the day was nearly over. Alon Palacio sat in the inn holding a mug of ale. But by evening, he realized 2 annoying nobles had come over to pester him with chatter. My lord Count Palacio, having only 1 guard seems a bit much, doesn't it? Maybe you lucked into the title and your finances are running dry. Alon Palacio looked at the scene in stunned disbelief. The problem isn't bandits, it's these nobles. He covered his helpless face with a plate. Enjoy taunting each other all you want. Go gossip somewhere else and get it over with. Actually, this wasn't new to Alon Palacio. He had been a legendary scoundrel whose power once ruled the entire eastern underworld, built on mountains of loot stolen from the criminal world. Alon Palacio recalled his own past, but having been content with his current life, he hung up his sword and was living well now. No big deal, the underworld's dangers no longer touch him. Alon Palacio regarded the scheming nobles like hunting dogs. Because of that, the eastern underworld had become a mine to be fought over by minnows. And the rumor that I became count not by merit, but by luck. Alon Palacio tilted his head, thinking it was almost true. Baseless rumors about a backer for the Palacio family had settled and degraded into calling him a lucky brat. He knew it all too well. Those 2 nobles ran up and boasted in front of him. Pathetic. Your coin pouch must be empty, right? Sob, sob, if you say the word I'll gladly donate. Alon Palacio wondered helplessly that they dared mock him to his face. Grow up and stop acting like children, these lunatics. Alon Palacio looked at the 2 nobles with a puzzled expression, thinking they'd clearly crossed the line. But at that moment a thought occurred to him. Ah, this is the festival of Palacio's victims. This is the festival of Palacio's victims. Alon Palacio recalled the ranks, Palacio, Crowd, Edorn, those who used to be ordered around by Palacio like walking coin purses. And looking at reality now, they were venting all the frustrations they'd suffered. They were wildly unleashing their anger out of control. Alon Palacio sat there helplessly wondering, was he really the one who'd drunk and provoked them from the start? Alon Palacio just sat there sighing and taking it, feeling like he was facing a bunch of jackals out to pick fights, probably blockers exhausted. At that moment, Even came out surprised and asked, oh, still not done taunting? Admirable effort. He shook his head and ignored them. The best approach was to pretend not to care. Even, where did you come from? Even replied in surprise, oh, they handed this out in the kitchen. Even showed what he was holding, roasted corn. Alon Palacio exclaimed, oh, that looks tasty. He sat there nibbling roasted corn beside Even, thinking to himself that this hunger-saving food was one of his favorites, especially on a cold night like this. Thinking back, the massive underworld army must have been unsustainable and was disbanded long ago, The carriage doesn't seem well maintained either. Oh well, whatever. He looked back at those 2 nobles. Sounds like they've really struck a deal, Planning to team up or what? Alon Palacio and Even sat enjoying the roasted corn, praising it. Tastes great. With a bit of butter slathered on it would be perfect. Meanwhile, at the northern expanse, the eternal icelands had been overrun by the man-dai tribes, as if no living thing remained, leaving only a cursed gray that surrounded everything. The one-armed man struggled to drag himself across the white snow. Ha! As he moved, he left smeared trails of blood on the snow, cursing in pain and fury. Damn Caliburns, they don't know the meaning of honor. He was one of the 8 great clan chiefs of the Man-Dai, KL Khan. And for the Man-Dai, who worship combat, death on the battlefield is the highest glory and noblest dignity. But this time was different because he had fallen into the trap of that knight Caliburn who challenged him, and was defeated by his cowardly sneak attack. The chieftain coughed up a mouthful of poisonous blood. He lay sprawled, weak, hacking and gasping. That chieftain lay on the white snow, moaning helplessly. If this goes on, what will become of Snowstead Station? Snow kept falling relentlessly over the frigid north, and the chieftain sank deeper beneath the cold blanket. He lay there crying out with his last breaths. KL Khan had been shamed beyond measure, unable to die with honor on the battlefield. The cold snow fell thickly, his eye sockets bled nonstop. Oh, my flesh and blood. Amid the frozen north, a voice rang out. Call my name. That voice echoed around the chieftain. Proclaim my great title. The sound commanded the title you have always revered. The chieftain groaned the name. He whispered the name Ultaltis. The chieftain's body grew weaker. He wailed a whisper to the snow, Great One. With his remaining hand, he forced himself up into a sitting position. The great chieftain turned his body upward and shouted, I supreme deity, Ultaltis. He pleaded up to Ultaltis, I dare to speak your name. Ultaltis smiled in approval. Good, then I will grant your wish. The convoy carrying Alon Palacio continued on to the Rotter family's grand feast. En route to the social banquet, the sweet comforts of middle-aged life went on. Even with other houses attending, the jeers never stopped. The 2 nobles Krailed and Edorn got drunk and mocked Alon Palacio, singing and dancing. What, that's it and it's a talking point? Pathetic enough to make me cry. Alon Palacio blandly told himself, we just need to ignore them and not give them anything. This is the bare minimum courtesy of a gamer spotting a juicy target. The convoy went a bit further then stopped. We'll camp here for the night. Victory belonged to the one who ignored and the one who tried desperately to provoke. The 2 nobles Krailed and Edorn flew into a rage, shouting at that bastard for always brushing them off. Unbelievable. Krailed and Edorn exchanged looks and asked each other what they were thinking. How's the escort reinforcement looking? I checked with an item. We only have that brat and that knight Duon. Daring to sit at the same table with the nobility, Alon Palacio shouted while nibbling corn, It's hot. Even worriedly said, Let me blow on it for you. The 2 sighed and accepted. Looks like the rumor that they're useless is true. The 2 nobles, Krailed and Edorn, conferred. Then let's launch the plan to take over the underworld. No need to give the Palacios any respect now. They grinned wickedly to each other. Massive wealth and power flow through the underworld. Finally, we'll taste it ourselves. If we seize the underworld, we should give him a gift. Right. Krailed and Edorn gleefully painted their future, teaching him the brutal taste of this world in a way he'll never forget. Ha ha, you're surprisingly generous. As they laughed, they heard a rustling sound. When they turned toward it, they screamed. Krailed and Edorn pointed trembling in that direction and shouted, Monster! Some ran inside, others rushed out to fight. The frontline mages fired a flare up into the sky, signaling danger to the whole convoy. The signal flare marked the location of the monsters and projected targeting cues. Members of the group recognized goblins and breathed a sigh of relief. Huh, what is this? Just goblins? These are the weak monsters you normally find in the woods. But suddenly they realized something else. What if their numbers are enough to sweep everything away? The convoy stared in disbelief. The monsters, bearing heavy weapons, advanced forward. The party heading to the feast frowned and shouted, Damn it, the outer sentries are all dead. What the hell is going on? Many members stammered, I've never seen goblins shaped like this before. Their size is different. Are these a new mutation? And they're saturated with magic, which meant both sides sprang up, ready for battle. But the strength gap was clear. Their physiology was unlike anything we knew. The monsters attacked relentlessly without tiring. They struck where the humans stood, earth and stone exploding on the human side, and offered no mercy in retaliation. Monsters scuttled across the ground in chaos, concentrating their strength. Monsters scuttled across the ground in chaos, pooling their strength. They stopped, looked around, then shouted, Ki-he kick! Now the monsters have all gathered in one spot. Mages and knights consulted. The triple circle magic wall and the double circle magic are complete. There's only one other mage shielding us. Who is he? At that moment, Alon Palacio appeared and commanded an empowerment. The knights and mages turned to look at the one who just struck. The light halted for a beat, then began to spiral forward. Alon Palacio thrust his hand out, a punch of force. The monsters screamed in pain, ki-hei kick. They couldn't escape the empowered circle. Sounds continuously rang out, ki-hei kick. An entire horde of monsters was trapped inside the empowerment sphere. The human group, bothered by the haze, fell back. Alon Palacio strolled up to the sphere with effortless confidence. He clenched both hands, squeezing to create a vacuum. Intense light burst from between Alon Palacio's palms. Earth, rocks, and shards of light began to explode and rain down everywhere. Alon Palacio spoke another primal command. The ring on Alon Palacio's arm lit up in steps like a bar of representative power. The empowerment sphere then detonated, scattering the horde to pieces. Alon Palacio stood calmly in place, watching everything. The two nobles, Kraeld and Edorn, gaped in disbelief at the scene. The mages and knights were stunned, and couldn't believe it either. Alon Palacio turned and reminded everyone, "Don't just stand there, get ready to move." Everyone quickly pulled themselves together to fight the approaching monsters. Humans and monsters crashed into each other. Alon Palacio swung his hand to support the circle of mages. Countless precision slashes from his hand were sent at the monsters. Those slashes were precise and didn't harm any humans. Even, fighting nearby, turned in awe to look. Time continued to pass. The brave humans kept fighting without retreat. Neither side stopped until dawn. After the quiet, those who had hidden in safety ran out, cheering, "It's over, it's finished." The mages and knights panted, exhausted but relieved and proud. All eyes turned toward Alon Palacio, everyone thinking about him. Looking at Alon Palacio and his armor, everyone wondered who he really was. But no one knew his face had gone pale. He'd nearly died, that was trouble. Alon Palacio glanced at the special ring on his hand. Although his daily spell uses had increased, it was still only 3 or 4 times. In battle, he was just an ordinary man with a small mana core. Even ran over and asked, "Count, are you hurt anywhere?" Alon Palacio nodded and replied, "I'm fine." Alon Palacio still looked pale, thinking that even with even here, losing the ability to protect himself was truly terrifying. Even asked in confusion for confirmation, "Are you really okay?" He answered, "I'm fine." Alon Palacio thought to himself that he had been so annoyed he almost went alone, but was lucky to have come with the nobles. But this death stone is the bigger problem. How did it appear? Spirit crystallization is a strange phenomenon that occurs when an evil god is about to descend. The affected monsters become more ferocious, and their bodies grow stronger. Alon Palacio moved while pondering, how could this happen? It shouldn't be like this. He remained puzzled. Clearly, this should only occur when the 5 great sins are born. Have the world's rules broken down so much that those evil gods can appear? And this signals that soon they will descend upon this land. Alon Palacio held his head in despair at the thought. While the youngsters haven't awakened the power of the 5 great sins yet, why? What on earth is happening? That day, Alon Palacio set things aside and decided to gather information as soon as they arrived. He glanced back and observed that if this keeps happening, sooner or later our heads will be off our shoulders. The 2 nobles in the rear were still shell-shocked, clutching their heads, pale and speechless. The next day, the Roediger ducal family, Alon Palacio, was gloomy from the long journey. He groaned tiredly, finally arriving at last, because the entire banquet party ran into one trouble after another. The veil on the grand social gala had been lifted. Even sat behind massaging Alon Palacio's shoulders and neck. He complained he just wanted to go home and get a good sleep. Inside the grand social gala gathered countless nobles, all elegant and refined, but it was just a painted facade. Alon Palacio looked around assessing the Lotter family feast. Wow, is all this decoration gold? It must be expensive, right? Even sipped his wine and boredly mocked, flaunting his wealth on purpose. Maybe I could swipe a piece and no one would notice. The red earth looked so rustic and tacky. Lost in thought, Alon Palacio heard voices from afar. "My Duke Lotter is truly something extraordinary." The Lotter noble laughed and replied, "Isn't it because my little bird won't leave me alone?" The other nobles chuckled and offered advice. "Ah, Duke, you must take care of your health." The more Alon Palacio watched, the more he disliked it, thinking mingling with these nobles brings nothing good. I don't want any part of it, better to step back. But at that moment, someone targeted him. Over there, Alon Palacio felt unbelievably unlucky. Just as he planned to avoid trouble, the 2 nobles Kraeld and Edorn, flattering, approached and spoke. "Ho, ho, ho, Count Palacio, could you spare a moment?" They presented an offering before him. "This is prime meat from my domain. Would you like to try some? I intend to support your holdings. What do you think?" Alon Palacio tilted his head in confusion. "What is this? Why all of a sudden?" Kraeld and Edorn trembled anxiously when they saw his expression. Seeing the Count's complexion, they secretly panicked. This is bad. Kraeld and Edorn tried to calm each other, but couldn't help being flustered. Flashback to the day before, after the battle with the goblins. "Did you just see that? Was that magic?" Krailed and Edorn clutched their heads in confusion, staring toward Alon Palacio and Even. One turned to the other and asked, "Did you just see something? Was that magic?" Krailed and Edorn rushed over and called, "Baron Cayman, may we borrow your mage for a moment? We have a question." The one pulled along was the third-rank mage Lord Amen had brought to show off. The third-rank mage, confused, held his wand and asked, "What is it?" The two nobles panicked. That surge of mana just now. They remembered that terrifying source of power and couldn't help but be horrified. They trembled, probing. "That was only second rank, right?" The third-rank mage pondered. "Second rank." Then she denied it, leaving the two stunned. "How could it be second rank? Definitely not. He's on a level far above me, so from third rank upward then." Krailed and Edorn blinked back tears, wondering, "Becoming Count Palacio by luck? Don't be ridiculous." They had witnessed that power. He needed no guards. The look Alon Palacio gave when he turned during the magical battle still haunted them. They thought of him as someone who hid Palacio's ruthless, cold nature. So now, to save their skins, they tried bribery. With no other option, Krailed and Edorn decided they had to bow. I was willing to behave rudely toward Lord Palacio. I had been lost in delusions and gone mad. Both of them pleaded, "Please have mercy." Even walked up to Alon Palacio and asked, bewildered, "What is this? You followed me all the way here to say this." He tiredly wondered, "What on earth is going on? I still don't understand any of it." Even put a hand on his shoulder and asked if he should deal with them. He shook his head, saying it would only waste effort. He sighed, remembering that even for a tolerant nation this had crossed the line. Alon Palacio answered Even, "Let me handle it. I don't have that kind of power, but just scare them as much as you can." Then Alon Palacio glared to play the part of a cruel man. The two nobles, Krailed and Edorn, fell to their knees in terror on the banquet hall floor. They grabbed each other's hands and wailed, "We're done for. This is worse than death." After that, the party continued on, fake and boisterous as ever. Alon Palacio glanced around and sent Even to the Intelligence Guild. "I'll dig up some information about those nobles." Alon Palacio picked up a pastry, nibbling as he listened to the nobles talk. "Oh ho, those two seem to be talking about something secret." The two nobles nearby stood in a corner chatting. Alon Palacio tried to eavesdrop. He considered using magic to enhance his hearing, but that would be a different matter. One noble asked, "Have you heard the news about Duke Althea and Count Zenonia?" Alon Palacio was stunned. "Yes, I heard they're about to form an alliance, right? Just that alone is strange." He munched his pastry and thought, what's the big deal? That's nothing to worry about. Alon Palacio clicked his tongue at the two. After all, the families behind them have never liked each other. That alliance probably won't last long anyway. Then he nibbled his favorite piece of pastry. Alon Palacio remarked, "The tea's excellent. This place really is top-notch, and there's even bigger gossip." "Don't gape," the two nobles continued. "Their leader isn't either of these two, so who is it?" They whispered while Alon Palacio remained absorbed in his pastry. It was said that when they heard the name, the two of them were struck like lightning, because the name they mentioned was Palacio. Alon Palacio heard it and dropped his pastry. Their leader, he looked over there in confusion. Alon Palacio felt like he was going to lose his mind when he heard them say it. They said it was Count Palacio. He silently reevaluated his life up to this point. What nonsense are they talking about? As for Duke Althea, I'd only met her once when she was still a young lady, and Lady Zenonia I've only met a few times. Alon Palacio clutched his head in helplessness. The current Count Zenonia had never even met him, so how did such a ridiculous rumor spread? It's clearly just idle gossip. Just then someone else ran over calling, "Count Palacio." Alon Palacio wearily wondered why so many people were approaching him today. It made him uneasy. The noble came up to introduce himself. "I am Cayman, the third son of the Comalan ducal family from the kingdom of Ashutalan, honored to meet you." He half understood. At a major ceremony like this, nobles from allied countries would come too. "Yes, pleased to meet you. I am Count Palacio." Cayman suddenly went crazy, provoking Alon Palacio. "I heard you became a count by sheer luck. I'm so jealous I had to come see if you have some special trick." He was a bit annoyed now and scolded inwardly. Even a taro waffle cone can talk these days." Just then other nobles came over to confront that idiot Cayman. "What did you just say? Are you defending Alon Palacio? Are you mocking and insulting the nobles of our kingdom Asteria?" Cayman nervously tried to explain, "No, that's not it. What is this? Isn't that just a harmless punching bag to take out anger on?" This idiot will now introduce himself. "I am Cayman Comalan, a romantic and refined gentleman. I traveled far to marry the youngest daughter of the Lauder ducal family. Would my fiancé like to try the exquisite pastry I brought? What woman in this world is perfect in every way?" Cayman, accompanied by his fiancé, glanced at the two young ladies who walked by. HMPH, he immediately switched to mean judgment mode. That lady should pay attention to her figure a bit, right? Cayman babbled beside the latter lady, who had a slightly upturned nose. Then he turned to flatter his fiancée. Fortunately, the latter lady, like her mother, was truly beautiful. Now was the time to charm her. The latter lady rejected our engagement proposal. I must reconsider, Cayman cried out in panic. What? He sat there calling after her. Lady Lotter? For some reason, the engagement between me and Lady Lotter has been broken. Cayman stormed into the main banquet hall in fury. I traveled so far for this. It's truly infuriating. At that moment, Cayman saw Alon Palacio standing there nibbling a pastry alone. Cayman sized up Alon Palacio, black hair, cold face. Is that the guy? Count Palacio. HMPH, they say he's just a lucky kid with no backing. He saw him as easy pickings, an ideal target to take his anger out on. Flashback over now. The marquises and counts asked Cayman, didn't you bring proper decorum? The Kingdom of Austria is our longtime ally. Cayman, like a small, trembling mouse, stammered an explanation. No, it's not that, it's because. Alon Palacio watched the scene helplessly and sighed. How unlucky must one be to make these three step in together? And why does this nobles ganging up scene feel so familiar? Watching Cayman Comelin bow and plead, I am sorry. The three top nobles scolded him like strict officers. You think saying sorry makes it all over? He trembled, taking punishment and crying, I'm sorry, but the three men wouldn't relent. Does saying sorry fix it? Alon Palacio finally remembered what that looked like, brought back memories of military service. Cayman sobbed and ran off, sniffling. I've committed a great disrespect. I deserve to die. Duke Lotter, Marquis Mardanio, and Count Balin came over and asked if Count Palacio was all right. He hurriedly waved them off. I'm fine. Afterwards, Alon Palacio kept it to himself. But why is everyone acting so strangely today? I'm starting to get scared. From what he observed, they had already started to move. That proved the rumor was true. And if Althea and Zenonia entered politics seriously, Palacio's power as their leader would be immense. Alon Palacio wondered if it was because of that rumor. This was getting messy. Better to clear it up by saying it's just a rumor. Marquis Mardanio stepped forward to speak. Come to think of it, I've never actually talked with you, Count. Duke Lotter added. You must be very busy, I understand. Alon Palacio awkwardly began. Actually. Marquis Mardanio rubbed his hands and asked. I've heard that lately Count Palacio has been busy researching magic. Coincidentally, I happen to have a few fine artifacts. He continued, so I'd like to present you these relics that can store mana. What do you think? Duke Lotter and Count Balin also stepped forward offering, what a coincidence, I brought a gift too. Count, please accept this token of our goodwill. Alon Palacio was dazed. He should definitely clarify it was only a rumor. But he couldn't resist the temptation, so he stayed silent and accepted 2 magical artifacts and 5 vials of mana-restoring potions. Dawn at the Lotter ducal villa. In the villa's parlor, a mysterious woman asked Marquis Mardanio, how did things go? He replied. Fortunately, he accepted happily. Small gifts among nobles are just social ritual, but a prized item like a relic carries a different meaning. Those who want to join a faction and offer precious items to its leader. The woman said, it means as long as he accepts, we're already pleased. Marquis Mardanio laughed out loud. It's all thanks to Duchess Althea's generosity. She raised her hand excitedly and said, welcome, Marquis Mardanio. The Duchess smiled. Althea cheerfully declared, from now on we officially share the same front. He replied, this truly is a tremendous honor. Everyone was more than willing to agree. He thought to himself that Duchess Althea is usually reserved and rarely appears. Yet this time she personally came and met with only a few individuals. She likely had already selected the necessary pieces, using money and influence deftly to bypass formalities. Although the rumors seemed random and originless, this was actually a very clear political move. The opportunity is laid out before us. We must seize it. Duchess Althea then spoke up, cutting through the silence. Now it's time for us to take action. This was the 4th day since the banquet opened. For some reason, the number of gifts kept increasing each day. It was surely because of the absurd rumor about my relationship with Althea and Zenonia that everyone rushed to curry favor. A crafty glint crossed his face. Having accepted them, they probably won't ask for them back. I'll gather all these and find a way to slip away unseen. But a voice from behind startled him. Even spoke up, my lord. Seeing him startled, he asked curiously, why do you look so shaken? I'm back. Alon exhaled softly in relief. I was just lost in a few thoughts. Then the two of them returned to their room. Hearing Evan's report made him jump and blurt out, to the north. Has the evil god really manifested in the north? He replied, yes, Caliburn is in utter chaos. Based on old documents, Medist may also be linked to this evil force. He rubbed his temples and asked, "What about the additional information I requested?" He answered, "The person you're looking for is currently staying in that village, north of the kingdom of Ashutalan." This made him nod in satisfaction. "Good, we can stop by on the way. We'll set out for Caliburn immediately." The sudden decision startled Even. Why rush like this? Why must the destination be Caliburn? Are you really deciding to head north? He replied, "We'll go over the specific details on the way. Prepare to depart right now." He nodded in confirmation. Understood. After Even left, Alon leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples in frustration. Truthfully, he didn't want any of this to happen here. These are entities of catastrophic scale comparable to the 5 great sins. The evil gods. Because of the influence of spirit crystallization, you can't predict which evil god will borrow a mortal body to descend. That's why I've been working hard to gather intelligence to stop them early. I didn't expect things to escalate this fast. From gaming experience and seeing hundreds of possible scenarios, the world's outcome has come into focus in my mind with alarming clarity. Alliances between kingdoms will crack and fully collapse, leading to a pointless war over lands tainted by otherworldly power and ending in total annihilation. If that happens, my current life will vanish in an instant. Although I've devised contingency plans, after an evil god descends, there will be a temporarily calm period lasting a few months before it fully awakens and becomes a dwelling god. During that transition, its divine spirit power won't be perfected yet. Exploiting that window is probably the most viable option. Nothing is certain, but I have to take the gamble. Because it's the only path left, I wonder what that kid would like. Cut to a week later, a runner burst in and reported, "Captain." He took the letter and began to read it. Suddenly his eyes widened in surprise. He immediately called the vice captain. The other replied, "Yes." He ordered, "Send word that the northern advance is postponed for another 2 weeks. On the fields near the village of Parkurun, in the northern kingdom of Ashutalan." He was already there. His gaze was a bit dazed as he thought to himself how unexpected it was to meet now. A boy stepped up to the two of them and said, "Hello, sir." He kept thinking that the boy had a very striking appearance. This boy was Eliban, the protagonist of the RPG Psychedelia, the character players embody. The protagonist's aura is different from anything else. This face was exactly what he'd seen in the game. Was that really a boy? He was truly extraordinary in person. He looked down at the boy and asked, "Do you know who I am?" The boy scratched his head and replied, "No, sir, I'm just excited to meet strangers for the first time. My name is Eliban." Looking at the boy, he kept wondering how different this real world would be from the game. The concept of a protagonist really can't be wrong. Sooner or later, he'd gain renown and possess overwhelming power compared to the character he once controlled. Standing before the character he used to control felt strangely unfamiliar. Pulling himself together, he said, "You're a bright, very polite boy." Then he handed a small pouch into the boy's hands. "Here, take this." The boy opened the pouch and found a gold coin, asking, "Oh, isn't this money?" He paid no attention and turned to call Even. Even immediately took out a suitcase, opened it, and inside were several mana vials. This surprised the boy greatly. Then Even pulled out countless more gift boxes. In an instant, the pile of gifts was stacked into a mountain behind them. Pointing back, he declared confidently, "All of this now belongs to you." The boy's eyes went wide. "Hey, all of this is really mine." Then he asked curiously, "Why are you suddenly giving me so much money?" He replied, "Think of it as an investment." He thought to himself that he'd already equipped the protagonist with everything needed for the early growth phase. He put a hand on the boy's shoulder, speaking decisively, "Because in the future you'll surely become someone far greater than this." He continued thinking, "So grow up quickly and clear out those evil gods for me." Then he turned and walked away, thinking what a considerate gesture this would be. At least use material things to win people's hearts. He suddenly turned back to introduce himself. "Pardon my late introduction. I'm Count Palatio, remember that name well. I'm the benefactor who's sponsoring you so you can succeed later on." The boy hurried after him. "Thank you, sir." "No, my lord Count, I will forever remember this favor." Sitting in the carriage, he looked out and thought, wait, was he always this enthusiastic? A dark fantasy game shouldn't really have such a bright atmosphere. Beside him Even spoke up. "My lord Count, I roughly understand what you're doing, but is it okay to just leave without explaining everything clearly?" He replied, "He's a smart kid. He'll figure things out himself." He kept thinking that the situation directly involved lives and was urgent. He couldn't linger just to farm favor points. To be safe, I even activated an auto-leveling mode for the protagonist. Paid power is ridiculously strong. Even assessed that, in any case, the child seemed to possess innate talent. Dense mana was surging powerfully, totally at odds with his simple clothes. It seemed he was carrying some kind of miraculous relic. He added, "Even I can feel that flow of magic." He mused again that the character should only have basic stats before starting a journey. This was definitely another deviation from the original game. Maybe the butterfly effect produced this unforeseen result. For a protagonist, such a change is even more pronounced. But whatever, as long as my plan to enjoy a peaceful life isn't affected. He replied, the stronger he gets, the more it benefits me. This investment will definitely pay off. After all, Eleben is one of the rare people with a kind heart in this brutal world. So there's probably nothing to worry about. Wait, kind heart. He turned to Even and asked about that. The name Deus, would he agree to meet with me? He thought to himself that Deus was so fearful he had never even set foot in the orphanage once. He didn't expect things to come this far. Even replied, I think he'll agree to meet you. He sighed, maybe so, huh? Alon replied uncertainly, implying it might happen, showing the quiet sorrow of a young reincarnate. After that exchange, Alon went into the room and checked all his belongings. Evan noticed the mess and expressed disbelief at why Alan had bought so many miscellaneous items. Alan calmly explained that these items were bribes for the person who would save him in the future. 10 days later, the journey reached the capital, Caliburn. Kedum, the massive northern gate of Kedum, appeared before them, majestic and orderly, marking the end of a long road. As the carriage continued forward, Evan grew increasingly weary from the constant travel. Boredom and exhaustion seeped into him, and he frankly voiced his extreme fatigue. Alon, equally tired but composed, remarked that long journeys are inherently tiring and unavoidable. Evan, still trying to overcome his disappointment, reflected on how the final stretch had been worsened by the strange maze they had to pass through, feeling that without it, he might at least keep some pride about their arrival. Alon calmly accepted the hardship, understanding there was nothing to be done to change it. As the carriage rolled on, Alon gently held the necklace in his hand and sank into thought. He recalled their travels from place to place, preparing for the coming battle against the gods beyond, accumulating strength and gathering gifts along the way. His thoughts turned to Deus, wondering if those efforts would be enough to please him. A father's heart rose within him, a man who wanted to give without hesitation or reserve. As the city gate drew nearer, Evan realized it would soon be their turn to be inspected. Shortly after, Evan stepped down from the carriage and moved forward to undergo the capital's check, expecting the process to end with a simple identity verification. He reassured Alon he would be back soon. Alon, still appearing relaxed, waved goodbye and encouraged him to rest comfortably. Left alone, Alon sat comfortably in the carriage, allowing himself a brief rest, closing his eyes and feeling relieved that at least in this city things seemed to proceed quickly and efficiently. That calm did not last long. Evan quickly returned with a tense expression and urgently told Alon that a small problem had arisen. Alon wanted clarification, and Evan explained that they had been asked to step aside. Although Alon's identity had been verified, it seemed something else was causing concern. He replied without seeming anxious. Alon stepped out of the carriage. At that moment, a knight approached from behind. The man wore a crooked, overconfident smile, raising an eyebrow as he neared. He recognized Alon immediately and confirmed whether he was Count Palatio. The knight introduced himself as Burin, claiming to be a direct disciple of Chief Knight Fiola, known as the Fourth Swordsman. With a smug look, Fiola stared at Alon. His smirking smile was provocative as tensions at the northern gate quietly escalated. A fleeting discomfort crossed Alon's mind when he noticed the unfamiliar name Fiola. He wondered what the name could even mean to him. Realizing he had no idea who Fiola was, he kept a cold, indifferent expression and openly questioned the situation, noting that Fiola even brought knights and demanding to know the purpose behind that display. Fiola calmly explained that a friend of his from the kingdom of Ashutalan had sent a message saying he was indebted to Alon. Alon immediately rejected that notion, saying nothing like that had ever happened between them. His discomfort deepened when a realization surfaced. He suspected that the so-called friend could only be the overly dramatic and unstable man Cayman. In a clearly exasperated tone, Alon asked if Fiola's friend was Cayman. Fiola replied with a malicious smile, raising an eyebrow as he confirmed that Alon had indeed thoroughly offended his friend. Inwardly, Fiola recalled his friend's angry words, remembering how Cayman said he had been utterly humiliated. Fiola silently vowed to avenge Count Palatio for that humiliation. The scene then cut back to the past, showing Cayman contacting Fiola through a magically created orb. Cayman appeared enraged and exhausted, seething as he described how Count Palatio had gravely wronged him. With the help of 3 other men, he called Alon a bastard and informed Fiola that the Count was heading to Caliburn. asking Fiola to attack him in vengeance. Cayman's expression darkened further as he slowly spread a confident smirk. He tempted Fiola by suggesting that if he truly wanted to improve his skills, he would need more deep chasm corpses to work with. The memory continued as Fiola laughed loudly, admitting he owed his friend a debt. He was determined that at least he would put on an impressive show to repay him. The memory continued as Fiola laughed loudly, admitting he owed his friend a debt. He was determined that at least he would put on an impressive show to repay him. At that moment, the knights accompanying Fiola suddenly acted. In unison, they drew their swords and quickly surrounded Evan and Alon. Steel flashed under the lights near the northern gate. A look of confusion appeared on both their faces as the situation escalated abruptly. Evan reacted instinctively, drawing his sword and taking a defensive stance beside Alon. Frustration welled up in Alon's mind as he assessed the situation. He bitterly thought that the brat had started this, run off, and now this mess had followed him here. He recognized clearly that it was revenge carried out through a friend. He found that behavior pathetic and cowardly. Fiola then drew his sword. He stepped forward and pointed the blade straight at Alon's chest, the corner of his mouth curling into a smug smile. He stated his demand plainly, insisting that if all valuable items inside the carriage were surrendered, he might consider showing mercy. He regarded this action as nothing more than a favor he had been asked to perform. Pride filled Fiola's mind as he maintained his confident smile. He believed he had nothing to lose in this situation. In his assessment, everything tipped in his favor. The odds of success leaned completely toward him. From his perspective, Alon was merely a minor noble from the kingdom of Asteria, someone with little influence in the alliance and no ties to Caliburn. Fiola had thoroughly investigated the matter. With that certainty, he believed there would be no consequences from his actions. Alon clearly grew angry, irritated, and frustrated at Fiola's words, and a fleeting thought crossed his mind that like attracts like. He clenched his fist, and a powerful, flame-like energy formed in his hand, aimed directly at Fiola. At the same time, Fiola lunged forward with a wild grin, charging straight at Alon. Alon remained calm as another thought flickered through his mind, believing that even if things got a little messy, his master would handle it. Before the clash occurred, someone suddenly appeared from behind and forcefully grabbed Fiola by the throat, stopping him mid-attack. Fiola screamed in pain, accompanied by a distinct sound of bone breaking. The person holding Fiola's throat then lifted him high into the air. In too much pain, Fiola moaned helplessly as his sword slipped from his hand and fell to the ground. The pain grew so intense that the veins on Fiola's face began to bulge conspicuously, and he gritted his teeth to endure it. The person holding Fiola by the throat kept him suspended in midair, while Fiola, filled with rage and pain, tried to figure out who this person was and who would dare to kill him. As the scene continued, it was revealed that the one gripping Fiola's throat was none other than Deus. Deus stated plainly that his identity was irrelevant at the moment, and instead condemned Fiola's actions, asserting that Fiola had no right to lay a hand on someone who had helped him. Fiola remained suspended in midair, moaning uncontrollably from the pain. Unfortunately, an important truth that Fiola completely failed to understand gradually surfaced. The truth was that Count Palatian had won a duel with Kier of the Snowfield. Thanks to that victory, Count Palatian earned the title of Master Unarmed Knight and became known as the benefactor of Deus Macalan. Deus suddenly released Fiola and hurled him to the ground. Fiola groaned in pain as Deus relentlessly kicked him without mercy. Deus grabbed Fiola's hair with a vice-like grip, holding him down. Keeping his cold, fatal gaze, Deus turned his attention to the surrounding knights and issued a clear warning. He said that if even one of them dared to move, the consequences would exceed their imagination. Deus unleashed a brutal kick straight into Fiola's chest. The blow was so powerful that blood spouted from Fiola's mouth as he was flung away. Alon watched the scene in astonishment, a realization forming in his mind as he recognized that knight. This was the present-day Deus. Deus then told Fiola plainly that he should be grateful to be in a situation where he could not be killed. Fiola struggled to stand after the earlier blows, barely able to move as he leaned against a tree to steady himself. Immediately, Deus stepped forward and drove his knee hard into Fiola's chest, sending him crashing into the tree again. Fiola's cheek swelled severely from Deus's kick, and Deus continued to attack him mercilessly, unleashing one punch after another, and then more kicks without relent. Nearby, Evan remarked to Alon that his strike was quite impressive. Hearing that, Alon's mind returned to the moment Deus declared his wrath on anyone who dared lay hands on his benefactor. Alon suddenly realized that Deus had indeed called him a benefactor. He wondered how grateful Deus must have been when he was young. However, now that Deus had grown up, Alon thought he would not welcome someone he barely knew. He remembered that Deus had never even replied with a single word, which made him feel as if he had already received every deserved reward for raising a son. Alon told himself that Deus had truly matured, calling him a troublesome kid in his thoughts, yet also acknowledging his genuine growth. The impression became clear, marked as 52% certain that one could easily recognize who had sponsored Deus because he had developed remarkably. Alon realized that Deus had grown into an extraordinarily upright young man. With that realization, Alon reflected on the feeling of seeing a well-raised son, and he felt a deep pride as a father. A powerful impact reverberated through the scene. Evan then teasingly pointed out to Alon that he knew his son was beating someone mercilessly. Alon replied plainly that he hadn't heard. Deep down, Alon understood that Deus acted that way because his father had been insulted in a foreign land. As that thought settled in, the scene showed Deus continuing to kick Fiola ruthlessly, without any restraint. Another thought suddenly popped into Alon's head as he wondered why his son could be so annoyingly sweet. Soon after, Fiola was beaten savagely, repeatedly struck until he lost consciousness. Even then, Alon couldn't help but think it still seemed a bit excessive. At that moment, another realization suddenly occurred to Alon, reminding him once again that Deus was one of the 5 great sins. As the situation changed, Deus turned and stepped toward Alon. Then he stopped in front of him, bowed respectfully, and smiled confidently as he said he would escort him. At this, the remaining knights were utterly shocked by what they had witnessed. The scene opened on an icy land where a brutal battle had taken place. Corpses lay scattered across the battlefield, their frozen forms covering the ground. Some bodies were engulfed in flames as the opposing side burned them mercilessly. Amid that desolate landscape, Delman, bearer of Caliburn's 3rd sword and commander of the deep red flame, stood towering. Overflowing with victory, he raised his sword high, celebrating the outcome of the battle. Delman shouted, "One of the 8 chieftains, the great Culkin, along with his entire tribe, has been annihilated. The deep red flame knights have claimed victory on the kingdom's land." Hearing that proclamation, all the deep red flame knights erupted in joy. They cheered loudly, danced, and celebrated the hard-won victory they had achieved. After letting the celebration die down, Delman said, "Return to the outpost and begin preparations." The knights responded in unison, "Yes, Captain." As they began to move, Delman's expression hardened. In his mind, he reflected on his achievements, believing that after accomplishing something so significant, he should no longer be bullied by the newly appointed Master Knight. His anger deepened as he gritted his teeth. Delman thought that even if that man used shady tricks others didn't know, he still knew the truth. Caliburn and the Savages had a long-standing conflict, a war governed by mutual honor and unwritten rules. But this time, things were different. Culkin had been deceived. He was lured out alone and destroyed by a covert force. Delman recalled how Culkin's great knights were slaughtered and how truly unjust the entire campaign had been. By exploiting the momentum of the battle, the tribe was wiped out completely. Delman muttered, "That bastard." He remembered that the very man had sent him a victory report claiming to have defeated Kurga of the Snowfield. It all happened because Delman demanded a decisive result from the expedition. Culkin's body had vanished in the chaos of battle. Even if he had survived, the poison would have ensured his death. Finally, Delman convinced himself there was nothing left to do but return to Caliburn and report the mission's success. A crooked smile appeared on his face as he stepped forward. But then he suddenly stopped. From afar, he noticed a man standing motionless near the forward base. Confusion flickered across Delman's face. The man slowly turned toward him. The man spoke. Filled with rage, Delman gritted his teeth and swung his sword. Flames erupted from the blade, blazing fiercely. A strange unease crept along Delman's spine. Delman thought Culkin should be dead. On closer inspection, an overwhelming aura began to rise from Culkin's body. In Culkin's shadow, Delman saw the shape of a demon forming. Culkin said, "You have insulted a sacred duel. A duel that should have been fought with honor." Horror radiated from his presence. Even superhumans capable of ending hundreds of lives could be devoured by this being. Cold sweat ran down Delman's face. Delman realized, this is not Culkin. Driven by desperation, Delman launched another attack. Fire surged wildly from his sword. The man dodged easily and said, "Answer me first." Without hesitation, Delman attacked again, unleashing even greater flames. Once more, the man easily evaded his pursuit. Delman thought bitterly to himself, believing in battlefield duels is foolish. The fire scorched the ground, melting the ice around them. The man stared at him with a deadly gaze. The man said, "You are strong for a human. I will give you one last chance. Fight me." Sensing the danger, Delman shouted, "Prepare to fight." The knights surrounded the man from all sides. The man smirked, magic concentrated in both his hands. The man said, "A mortal without honor does not deserve a glorious death. There will be no duel between me and a savage like you." From his hands, poisonous magic erupted and spread into the fallen knights' bodies. The poison infected every corpse. The knights began to scream in unbearable agony. Their eyes turned blood red. As their bodies collapsed, some knights cried out, "Kill us, please end this." As their bodies fell, some knights shouted, "Kill us, please end this." As their screams faded, the man stepped forward. He tore Delman's throat with his bare hands. Immediately after, he struck the ice block, causing a massive explosion. The remaining knights were hurled into the air and slammed to the ground. Blood spread across the sky like a gloomy mist. Then the man unleashed a brutal punch. His fist drove straight through Delman's chest. Blood spurted from Delman's mouth. Delman whispered weakly, "Is there any other choice?" He collapsed to the ground, trembling in pain. Delman cried, "It hurts. Kill me, please kill me." Moments later, Delman died. As life faded, the man's eyes turned blood red. The man said, "Savages, you are all creatures made from death, robbed of your rightful passing." The fallen knights began to rise, surrounding the remaining red-clad knights. Panic spread through their ranks. The man declared, "The blood arena is now open." Suddenly, a terrifying presence descended. Ultaltis appeared with a sneer. Althus proclaimed, "I am the god of all savages, the father of duels. I will personally grant you an honorable death. If you claim not to be savages, prove it in a duel." Blood began to rain down from the sky. The scene then shifted away from the battlefield. Deus bowed respectfully. Deus said, "I will take you there, Count Alon." The surrounding knights stood stunned in astonishment. The narration explained that in Caliburn, the prestige of Duke Deus Massilian, who needs no sword, was sky-high. He had once defeated the second prince and showed deference to no one except the king. Alon observed him carefully. The knights wondered, what kind of man is Count Palatian to be so respected? The surrounding knights looked at Alon in disbelief. One knight whispered, "Who is he?" Deus summoned a luxurious carriage. Deus said, "Please take a seat inside." Alon felt weighed down by the excessive attention. Evan quietly said, "You go ahead, Alon. I'll follow behind." Before long, Alon had arrived at Deus's mansion. Stepping out of the carriage, he saw a massive, radiant structure that resembled a giant, crab-shaped fortress. Inside, silence enveloped the mansion. Alon thought, technically, arriving here is a success. I obtained the Kim Dong Dong, but something feels off. After careful thought, Alon decided to be honest. Alon said, "I would like to speak with you for a moment. I came here with a purpose. I have a favor to ask." Deus looked surprised. Deus said, "You have come to ask me a favor. Please explain." Alon nodded. Alon said, "I will explain everything clearly." Deus replied immediately. Deus said, "Assisting you would be my honor." Inwardly, he realized this was not a command but a request. Deus then said, "Let's sit down and talk properly." They sat at the tea table. Silence filled the room. Alon thought, shouldn't the host sit at the head of the table? Despite some awkwardness, he felt strangely at ease. After a period of silence, Alon spoke again. Alon said, "I have two requests. I know they may not be easy to accept." He continued, "I must go north and I want you to come with me." Deus gave a slight smile. Deus said, "I would be glad to go with you." Alon felt uncertain. Then Deus revealed a surprise. Deus said, "I have already planned an expedition to the north." Relief appeared on Alon's face, but then he continued. Alon said, "The second request concerns the royal treasury of Caliburn." The atmosphere grew heavy. Alon said, "I wish to borrow an artifact." He looked straight at Deus. Alon said, "May I borrow the